CD4.
Chapter 15. "Alice, a word, please," Carmel said, suddenly appearing beside Alice's work area. Alice tried not to look as startled as she felt. She was doing nothing wrong, just dealing with emails. "Now, please." Alice got up, finding as she did her legs felt like jelly. She tried not to sigh out loud. This was clearly not a conversation for the ears of the others working around her. Alice followed meekly behind Carmel, feeling like a naughty schoolchild being walked down to see the principal. She wasn't as worried as she might have been. Carmel was probably about to thank her profusely for her quick thinking in dealing with the Catherine Watson Keyes situation 2 hours earlier. Of course, Carmel wouldn't want to admit in public she'd stuffed up. "Sit," Carmel commanded, as she closed the door to a small conference room with a solid metallic click. Alice sat with folded hands on the table in front of her and smiled at Carmel. "What do you think you were doing, undermining me in front of a client?" Alice's smile faded away and her face fell. "Sorry? When? How? What have I done?" She was genuinely baffled. Why couldn't the woman communicate clearly? "The Watson woman," Carmel continued. "This morning? How dare you leave the office? What were you thinking?" That I was taking her the keys to her house, which she was meant to receive over an hour and a half before then," Alice said haltingly. "Seriously? I'm in trouble for this? Don't you talk down to me. How embarrassing do you think it was to hear you'd gone behind my back and welcomed someone to their new property, the property I sold them? Just who do you think you are? You're my assistant, Alice. You are not an agent with this firm, and at this rate you never will be." "But I thought—" The fog was still not clearing for Alice. "That's your problem. You don't think. Or when you do the wrong thing. God, what is wrong with you? Little Miss Unhelpful, more like it," she added with a sneer. Alice could see Carmel was in such a state there was no point defending herself. Is the woman actually insane, or are we talking about something else that I don't have a clue about? Oh, God, I'm so confused. She stayed silent in case she incurred more of Carmel's wrath and was fired on the spot. "And how dare you drag Bianca in reception into it, place her job in jeopardy?" Alice's face was bright red and her neck was now catching up. She bit her lip as she felt it begin to tremble. Her chin quivered. "I'm really sorry, Carmel," she muttered, her voice choking. "Don't you dare cry, Alice." And then Alice was shocked and dismayed to feel, in one fluid movement, her throat tighten, her chin wobble, and tears burst from her eyes and trickle down her face. She couldn't stop the tears and anguish she'd been forcing back these past few weeks. Completely mortified, she sniffled and then openly sobbed. She just couldn't make herself stop. And then she became breathless and close to hyperventilating. She couldn't look at Carmel and tried desperately to get her breathing under control. "Jesus, Alice, you're pathetic. Pull yourself together. And don't involve yourself in things above your pay grade or undermine me again. Got it?" Alice could only nod. "Now clean yourself up and get back to work." And with a whoosh of air and waft of heavy perfume, the smell of which at that moment Alice positively loathed, Carmel left the room, closing the door with a much louder clunk behind her than when they'd come in. Gradually, Alice's tears stopped and her breathing steadied. Oh my God, how embarrassing. But I didn't get fired, did I? She sat there for a few moments trying to compose herself and figure out what had just happened. She went back over the conversation, well, rant, but was still none the wiser. Alice was genuinely mystified. Carmel had definitely been talking about Catherine Watson and Malvern Road because she'd said so, and she'd mentioned Alice leaving the office. But what did I do wrong? Well, other than leaving the office. She knew that had been a risk. Jesus, you bitch. I bloody made you look good and spared you an irate client. What's your fucking problem? I showed some initiative, your favourite bloody word, and you put me down. Jesus, what do I have to do? Alice remained confused. She could see what Carmel was upset about, but couldn't understand why. Wasn't a personal assistant meant to catch the ball if her boss dropped it? Wasn't the company all about looking after clients? And why have the phone put through to her if she was not meant to actually do anything about the calls she took on Carmel's behalf? Alice's temples were pulsing hard. No matter how many times she shook her head, physically or mentally, Alice couldn't understand why what she'd done was wrong. One thing Carmel was right about, she thought, was she had to pull herself together, clean herself up, and get back to work. At least she hadn't been fired. She sighed, dried her eyes, and blew her nose loudly before slipping out of the room and racing into the ladies' bathroom, which was thankfully just next door. She stared into the mirror, wondering how to get her puffy eyes and red, raw face back to normal without any makeup to hand. She couldn't stand there all day and wait for nature to take its course. Alice knew that in minutes Carmel would be on the warpath looking for her, or someone would come in wanting to use the facilities and ask her what was wrong. She didn't want to give Carmel any more ammunition or cause to look down at her with that demoralizing sneer. It was perhaps even worse than her cutting words, that look of disgust mixed with satisfaction. That's what it seemed to Alice. She's just a bully, Alice silently and gently told her reflection. Rise above it. She wet a wad of paper towels and held it to her face and eyes, and then, when the heat had subsided, she patted herself dry. Alice was glad Bianca wasn't at reception. It was the lunch fill-in, Amy, sitting there on the phone. Carmel didn't look up when Alice walked past her to resume her position behind her own desk. In fact, Carmel didn't speak to her for the rest of the day, despite Alice asking her several questions in order to clarify things she was working on. Each time, Carmel put on a very good show of not actually having heard her. Finally, Alice twigged on the third occasion of being ignored, and was stunned. You're seriously giving me the silent treatment. What are you, 12? Alice thought, shaking her head with disbelief as she returned to her desk. Carmel eventually answered each of her queries, but by email, snarly little one-liners. Near the end of the day, Alice was shocked to realize she'd been staring at her computer for several minutes, daydreaming about sticking the sharp letter opener into the back of Carmel's neck. Jesus, what am I becoming? Shocked, Alice was beginning to see how murders were committed. As she left the office, she briefly thought about trying to catch up with Brenda, but decided Carmel would love to have more ammunition to bully her about being a tattletale, or the satisfaction of Alice giving in and quitting. Anyway, she'd already embarrassed herself enough for one day. She was still running through the events in her head while cooking dinner. They just wouldn't leave her alone. And she was no less confused about her day by the time David walked in after having gone to the driving range to belt a bucket load of balls out into space. Perhaps that's what she should do to deal with the stress, she thought. Golf had never appealed to her, despite David initially wanting it to be their thing to do together on weekends. Alice just didn't see the point. To her, it was not only a waste of a nice walk, but an expensive waste. Sometimes she did go and walk around with him while he played. She was still teary and frustrated she couldn't pull herself together. She'd deliberately decided to cook with onions so she could blame them for her red eyes if David noticed and said something. And she'd chosen to make risotto so she could appear engrossed and not have to engage with him too much. She'd decided she was not going to tell him about her day. "I'm loving the new driver," he declared. "And my slice is improving," he said, sidling up to her while moving his arms in a swinging motion. "That's great," she said, managing a decent show of enthusiasm. "How was your day? Better?" "Yes, thanks, pretty good." "See, I told you, didn't I?" he said with pride. At that moment, Alice thought she might actually hate David. Instead of being startled by the thought, she just felt sad and lonely. "Thank goodness for you, Bill." She looked across at the little dog curled up in the bed nearby. As if reading her thoughts, he opened his eyes, looked up at her over his paws, and flapped his tail. Darling thing, she thought, hoping he'd pick that up too. She'd be a complete wreck if she didn't have him. Tears pricked again at the idea of life without him in it. "Hey, are you okay? Your eyes are red," David said, peering at her, frowning. "Onions," she said. "And allergies," she added for reinforcement. Though did anyone suffer hay fever this time of year? "Ah, yep, that'll do it," he said cheerfully. "Wine?" "No, thanks. I've got a bit of a headache." Chapter 16. On Friday morning, Alice sat on the couch after her shower and taking Bill for his walk. She was in her robe and would be running late for work if she didn't get dressed and leave in the next 7 minutes. But she could not make herself move. She stared into space, dazed, her brain empty. Alice thought she should be concerned that she felt so relaxed when ordinarily she'd be a ball of anxiety. She searched her body for aches and pains, something she could use as a reason to call in sick. She was past caring that she wouldn't be paid if she didn't go in, having not accrued enough leave yet. Thankfully, David wasn't there, trying to give one of his cajoling spiels, which she could only hope were well-meaning. He'd gone to the office early to be in on a conference call with one of the overseas officers. "Oh, Bill, what am I going to do?" she said to the dog sitting beside her with his head on her thigh. Bill snuggled closer, looked up adoringly at her and flapped his tail. Alice rubbed his soft, silky ears. "I've got to get organised and go. Carmel will be furious if I'm late." At the thought of Carmel, a shiver made its way from the back of her skull right down her spine, leaving an icy feeling in its wake. Tears erupted. She hugged her robe tighter to her, not so much against the cold, but to comfort her clenching insides. Her chest was so tight it hurt. Suddenly she couldn't breathe. If she didn't turn up, Carmel would have an absolute conniption. She really had better get going. But still Alice sat. She watched the digital clock on David's flash sound system in front of her click onto the time her last train left the station to get her to work by 8:45. She couldn't make herself care. Alice stared at her phone on the table in front of her. Dare she call in sick? Her pulse quickened as she picked the phone up. She turned it over in her hand. Who should she call, other than Carmel? She couldn't bear to hear her scorn, her criticism. What had the handbook said? Alice didn't have a clue. She could call Bianca on reception when 9 o'clock arrived. Brenda. She'd call Brenda from HR. Wasn't this within her job description? Probably not. Alice was a little ashamed at how gutless she was being. And then it dawned on her slowly like a bank of beautiful, thick, black clouds rolling in over the ocean onto land ahead of a storm. I never want to face Carmel again. Ever. And I don't have to. I'm going to quit. David, you can shove your patronising comments and disappointment up your arse. You don't know what it's like. Carmel, you won. Well done. Let me be a statistic. I no longer care. Bill, she said, causing the dog to look up at her and flap his tail. I quit. And I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. God, swearing felt good. Yep, sometimes there was no better word than fuck. If only she'd told Carmel to fuck off. That might be her only regret about quitting like this. Alice turned the phone over and began to search for Brenda, HR. Her insides quivered, but this time more from nervous excitement than fear. God, am I really going to do this? Seriously? Yes. She dragged her finger across the green spot to dial. She took several quiet, deep breaths while waiting. A part of her wanted it to go to voicemail. She'd give her name and say, "I quit, tell Carmel she won, I'm not coming back," and then hang up. Her heart rate spiked as Brenda answered. Alice, hi. Is everything okay? Hi, Brenda. No. I can't do this for another day. I'm not coming in again, ever. I understand I don't have to give notice since I'm on probation, right? Alice's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear herself think. Yes, that's right, Alice. Just slow down a second. I've made up my mind. Thank you for all you've done for me, but I just can't do it anymore. Carmel is too much for me. There, I've said it. Oh, how Alice hated admitting that. I understand. I'm very sorry to see you leave, but you have to do what's right for you. Could I just ask a favour of you, though? You can ask. Alice felt a little sad to be letting Brenda down. She really liked the quietly spoken woman. Meet with me this morning for coffee. Oh. Alice looked down at herself. That would require getting out of her robe, into clothes, and leaving the house. She wasn't planning on doing that. Please, You need to return your security pass, and it would really mean a lot to me. I feel I've let you down." "Oh, Brenda, please don't feel that. Okay, sure, I'll have coffee with you, but not near the office." "Great, that's fine. How about 9:45? Brenda said. "That's fine." "Oh, and I still need reimbursement of the taxi fare and shoe repair." "I'll text you the address of a little place out of the way." "Okay, I'll see you there." "Thanks, Alice. I'll see you soon. And Alice?" "Yes?" "Thanks for agreeing to meet with me. I really appreciate it." Alice hung up the phone. She was still shaking slightly. "I did it, Bill. I actually did it." She sat back into the couch to gauge how she felt. Good? Not really. Relieved? Yes, definitely. Scared? Yep, kind of. Of meeting with Brenda and of what David would say. If he loves me, he'll understand, or at least be okay with my decision. Alice took several long, deep breaths. She'd better get cracking if she were to get into the city and to the cafe in time. "Don't worry, Billy boy, I won't be long, I promise. Only a couple of hours, tops." Outside, the world felt much brighter to Alice than it had just an hour or so before when she'd gone for her walk. She almost laughed at her thought, and at how much better everything seemed this morning now she was free. She nearly broke into a skip on her way to the train station. She just hoped Brenda wouldn't try to change her mind. She'd hate to have to disappoint her further. Alice found the cafe Brenda had chosen down an alley. It was a lovely place. Grungy chic, she supposed the colourful, cluttered, slightly old-fashioned decor would be called. She stepped inside the dark space and looked around for Brenda and saw her tucked away in the corner at a small table. "Hi, Alice, thanks for coming," Brenda said. They hugged, Alice thinking Brenda held on longer than was usual for two colleagues who barely knew each other. "I'll just get us coffee. What would you like?" "A latte would be lovely, thank you." Alice waited for Brenda to return. It seemed to take forever, and when she came back with their drinks, Alice saw why. They didn't do table service. "Ah, that's good coffee," Brenda said after taking a sip. She closed her eyes briefly, and the slack look on her face and the sigh she let out as she put her cup down suggested a moment of pure ecstasy. Alice smiled and found herself relaxing a little. It certainly is." "Brenda, Alice," they said, speaking at once. "Sorry, you go," Brenda said quickly. "I just want to say I'm really sorry for letting you down and leaving the company in the lurch by leaving so suddenly. It's not me. Actually, I have not liked the person I've become recently. Once, I would never have considered being so unprofessional, but I just can't spend another second with Carmel, as pathetic as that sounds." "It's okay, Alice. I agree it's not ideal, but I do understand. You have to do what's right for you. At the end of the day, it is only a job. And as you were on probation, Gold, Taylor and Murphy could terminate you at any moment if they chose. It cuts both ways, so don't feel bad. Some things just aren't meant to be." "Thanks for saying that. I'm disappointed, though. I was so sure I'd... Oh, it doesn't matter now. Here's my pass before I forget," Alice said, handing over her security pass with the lanyard wrapped around it. "I don't ever want to go into that building again." "It's no trouble for me to hand it in. The other thing, and this is a little awkward, but I never got the $30 reimbursed from the shoe repair I picked up for Carmel that day of the meeting. Unfortunately, I don't have the receipt. I left it with the shoes on Carmel's desk at the time, so I now can't prove it. She denies she ever saw it." Alice cringed. God, she hated sounding like a dobber. "Right, I'm sure I can get payment sorted. $30? Brenda said, making a note in her phone. "Yes, thanks. Also, I'm so sorry to be loading all this onto you, but I had a $48 taxi fare too when the keys, yes, I heard about that." Alice coloured and looked down at the table in an effort to hide her embarrassment. "Oh, don't be embarrassed, Alice. Management was very impressed." Alice looked up, frowning. "Seriously? Well, not Carmel, probably. But the woman, Catherine Watson, I think it was, rang Paul, insisted on speaking with him to say how you saved the day." "Oh, that was nice of her. I have the taxi receipt," Alice said, opening her large wallet and fossicking through it. "Here." she said, handing it over. I just didn't know who to claim it from or how. I'll take care of it. I'll have both payments included in your final pay. Leave it with me. Right. Okay, I think that's all I needed to tell you about, Alice said. She was relieved to have it all out of the way and out of her head. For the first time in days, her brain was actually thinking clearly and logically. The fog was starting to lift. I'm sorry to unload that on you, but I've been so all over the place that I needed to deal with it before I forgot. Because after this, I don't ever want to give Gold, Taylor, and Murphy Real Estate another thought. Now that's me sorted. What did you want to see me about? I just wanted to check you were all right and apologise in person for not being around enough to give you the support you needed and deserved. I'm afraid I've been dealing with a few personal issues. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope everything is okay. It will be. But it's meant I haven't been there for you as much as I've wanted to be, as much as I ordinarily would have been. I feel I've let you down, Alice. Please accept my apologies. Brenda looked down at the table. Alice felt sorry for her. She was probably very good at her job, but, like Alice, she had been hamstrung. And of course she had to toe the company line, so she might not be able to be as honest as she wanted to be. It's not your fault, Brenda. Not your fault that Carmel's an evil, manipulative bitch. And you did try to help, I know that. That's very generous of you. I know now it's not entirely me, Alice said, suddenly feeling a little bolder. I was good at what I did before meeting Carmel and having her systematically break me down. Do you know, I could probably sue for the anguish, the mental torture. I won't. I'm just glad I've seen the light. I know you can't comment because of your loyalty and professionalism, but the way Carmel treats people is not okay, regardless of how much money she brings in. I know it's not. And you're right, I can't comment. Oh, I'd better get going, Brenda said, checking her watch. Thank you so much for meeting with me, Alice. Thank you, Brenda, for everything, for at least trying. I will make sure the extra money for the shoes and taxi are added to your final pay, she said, getting up. Alice stood and the two women hugged again. This time it didn't feel weird that they lingered. Good luck, Alice. And remember, you have great skills and are a truly lovely human being. Alice felt a wave of sadness at watching Brenda leave. She sat back down to compose herself before heading off. Wow, I'm free. I really am. Well, now what? I'm going to go home and spend a quiet day with Bill. She would not think about what was next beyond that. She needed to recover from Cyclone Carmel. Alice felt a lot stronger already. Chapter 17. Alice texted Lauren. OMG, I did it. I quit. Eek. She didn't really expect a response, as Lauren was a morning person and she was probably in the throes of writing. Alice didn't want to be the one to stop whatever flow of words might be happening, which is why she'd sent a text instead of calling. Though she realised Lauren would surely have her phone turned off or on silent if she didn't want to be disturbed. She almost jumped with joy when her phone sounded with a response. Well done, you. Text me your address and I'll bring cake to celebrate. Kiss, kiss. Seriously? Alice replied. Absolutely. Kiss, kiss. And then the phone actually rang. Lauren's name was on the screen. Hey, Alice said. Unless you don't want the company, Lauren said without preamble. Are you okay? Yes, no, honestly, I don't know now, Alice said, as a mixture of emotions started to swamp her. Where are you? In a cafe near the office. I just met with HR. I'm heading home now. Would you like to be left alone to process or have some company? And cake. I have chocolate cupcakes. Yum. But I don't want to put you out. You wouldn't be. Anyway, I'm the one offering. Actually, Lauren, I'd love some company. Thanks. No problem. Thought you might. Text me your address and I'll be there in around half an hour. Your new place isn't far from me. You're a gem. I can't wait to see your house and meet Bill. Alice hung up and sent the address to Lauren. She couldn't believe her closest friend in Melbourne after David hadn't already visited the house, and worse, that she didn't even have Alice's address. What had happened to the last 6 or so weeks? Had she really become so withdrawn? God, and she hadn't even returned Ruth's cheery phone message from last week either. Shit. She'd sent a text to say she'd get back to her, and then she'd completely forgotten. How could she have forgotten her like that? Ruth, of all people, her dearest and oldest friend. Jesus, Gold, Taylor and Murphy Real Estate had completely sucked her dry, more than she'd even realised. Well, not anymore. Through her bedroom window, having just changed into track pants and a t-shirt, Alice noticed Lauren out on the front looking around as if she wasn't sure if she had the right house. "Lauren!" she said, throwing open the front door and making her way down the path. "Thanks so much for coming." She gave her friend a hug. "You're doing me a favour, actually. I made these and you're saving me from eating them all. They're called procrastination cupcakes," Lauren said with a cheeky grin, as she lifted the lid on the Tupperware container she held to reveal rich chocolate cupcakes with little hats on top of mounds of cream. "Oh, wow," Alice said. "Sorry, Bill, none for you, little man," Lauren said. "Hold this," she said, and put the lid back on before thrusting the container into Alice's chest. She then squatted down. "Come here, you gorgeous thing." She picked up the small dog that was wriggling all over with delight at the attention. "Oh, aren't you a handsome boy?" Lauren put him down and looked around, taking everything in. "It's lovely. Not what I was expecting, but lovely." "Thanks. Come on in, I'll give you the grand tour. It's very white, and everything's so straight and neat. It'd last 2 minutes like this if I lived here," Lauren said with a laugh. "I didn't have you pegged as having OCD. Does David?" Alice laughed. "No, probably not far off, though. David, not me, that is. He does like everything in its place and clean and tidy. I like tidy too, but in that case, I'm surprised he was okay with having a dog. I think Bill was an appeasement present." "Sorry?" "To soften the blow of him being away so much," Alice explained. "Oh, right. God, I'm loving your stone bench tops," Lauren said, sitting down on a stool in the kitchen area and running her hands across the grey stone. "Tea or coffee?" "Oh my God, that is one stunning coffee machine. Coffee, please, white with one," Lauren said. "So what did David say about you quitting? Is he okay with it?" "I haven't told him. I'll tell him tonight." A part of Alice wanted to send him a text or leave a voicemail. David rarely answered his phone while at work, so he'd have blown any anger out by the time he came home. Another part of her said that telling him in person was the only way. She was ignoring the little nagging voice in her head that told her she was being a coward in putting it off. "One of the appealing things about being single is not having to tell anyone anything," Lauren declared, taking the chocolate hat from a cupcake and placing it in her mouth. Alice mused. "So, how are you feeling, honestly?" "Relieved, disappointed, scared, like I'm a failure. Exhausted at the thought of looking for another job. All of the above," Alice said sadly. "It'll be okay. You found this one. You'll find another. It just feels like I'm under so much more pressure now. Because of, she said, indicating the space around her. "Try not to be too hard on yourself. From the sounds of it, it was that Carmel woman, not you, who failed. Failed at being a decent human being, bitch." 4 weeks. Can you believe I only lasted 4 weeks? That must be some sort of record. "So, what did they say when you quit?" "Nothing, really. I rang Brenda from HR. She's great. I didn't need to give notice because of still being on probation." "That's good. And what did she say?" "Well, she wanted me to meet her for coffee, hence being in a cafe in the city when you called. I had to return my security pass anyway, and God knows I never want to go into that building again, so killing 2 birds with 1 stone seemed a good idea. I think I was hoping for an apology or at least some acknowledgement that Carmel is a nightmare and her behaviour is the reason why I've left. I told you I'm like the 7th PA of hers to leave in 2 years, didn't I?" Lauren nodded. "You'd think they'd start connecting the dots by now." Well, if they are, they're not letting on. Brenda was clearly towing the company line. It was as good as a shrug, and sorry it didn't work out all the best. Did you tell her you know about Carmel's track record with her PAs? No, I didn't want to get anyone in trouble. It's so disappointing knowing that nothing will change. Well, money has the power. I really thought I'd found my place. I think I would have been good at real estate, Alice said sadly. To be honest, Alice, I think you'd have been too nice. Yeah, maybe you're right. Thanks so much for coming around. It means a lot. No worries. I just thought you might be feeling conflicted and lost. It's a big, brave thing you've done. Yeah, right, Alice scoffed. I ditched a job after only 4 weeks. But you had the courage to put your well-being first, to say, this is not okay, enough is enough. That takes some guts. You should give yourself some credit. I don't think David's going to see it like that. Well, sod him. You know, I still can't quite put my finger on what the problem was. Carmel was. You know that. Yes, but she seemed so nice at first. From what I've read about narcissists since Brett told us about them, that's the thing. They're charismatic. They mentally wear you down until you don't know what's up and what's down. That's exactly how I felt, Alice said. Like I spent my whole day, every day, not knowing which way was up. I've become so unsure about everything and myself. Thankfully, you realised it isn't right to feel that way. What I don't understand is why she would want to drive PAs away like that. What does she gain? Power? Who would know? They're complicated people. I wouldn't waste too much time trying to analyse it. It'll do your head in even more. Just accept she's a sad, damaged individual who wouldn't know good help if it bit her on the arse and be grateful he got out. I think the trouble is that PAs generally are kind and caring people who want to please, and that's what a narcissist is attracted to and then feeds on. Maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I read that too. God, it's so bloody complicated. I didn't want it all to be true, to be a victim. The truth was, Alice had been disturbed by what she'd read and had tried to forget it. It wasn't just Carmel who seemed to tick a lot of the boxes. Exactly, which is why you need to stop thinking about it. Have another cupcake, I say. Good idea. God, I'm glad you're here, Lauren. At the risk of sounding like a true millennial, real adult life away from uni is hard. Oh, yes, it is. Well, I can't really talk. I'm fully aware and very grateful for my situation. You'd make a good counsellor, you know, Alice mused. Thanks, but I think I'd be too judgmental and far too blunt. Alice added sugar to their coffee cups and thought for a minute. What am I going to do without a reference? I don't know, but worrying about it won't help. You could always explain the situation to the next prospective employer. If they won't give you a job without the reference from your last report, anyway. I don't see how being honest will hurt. They might even appreciate your openness. Don't think about any of that now. At least take some time to recover your equilibrium. You've been hit for a 6, Alice, don't forget. I feel like I never want to step foot inside an office again, any office. And that's okay. Not when you don't have any other skills, it's not. Go back and do your honours and masters. David would have a fit if I even suggested that. Please don't place your whole future and well-being in David's hands. I know, Lauren said, holding her hands up. What would I know, being single and all? They enjoyed their second cup of coffee and cupcake before Lauren said she'd leave Alice to enjoy some quality time with Bill. Good luck with telling David tonight, she said when she hugged Alice at the gate. If he truly loves you, he'll understand. No one should want their significant other to be in a job that makes them miserable and messes with their whole psyche the way yours was. I'm only a phone call away if you need me. And remember, no job hunting today or tomorrow. Better yet, for a week or so. You need time to get your mojo back, rebuild your confidence. Bye, Bill. It was lovely to meet you, you gorgeous thing. Thanks so much for coming around and for the cupcakes and everything, Alice said. My pleasure. I hope I helped. Just be kind to yourself, Alice, and don't overanalyze it all. Some things, like the behaviour of a person like Carmel Gold, can't be easily explained or understood. You just need to let it go. Alice was grateful for having Lauren as a friend. She felt they'd taken their friendship to another level today, and she was so appreciative. Now, if David was as supportive and understanding tonight, she might just be okay. Chapter 18. Alice had taken Bill for a walk and then enjoyed a long soak in the tub, and in doing so had gained a whole new appreciation for the new house. Oh, how she'd missed having baths. The apartment hadn't had a tub, just a shower. Afterwards, she'd curled up on the couch with Bill and watched a daytime movie on TV. Now she stretched. It was 4:30. She'd better start getting dinner organised. But she sighed heavily and stayed put. She didn't feel like doing anything. Maybe a particularly good dinner might make her news more palatable to David. Green chicken curry or stir-fry? Her mobile phone sounded with a text. It was from David. Need a steak, heading out for dinner. Even better. Have fun. I'll happily stay right where I am, she thought as she unlocked her phone to read the whole message. Oh no. Need a steak, heading out for dinner, pick you up outside your office at 5:15. Alice's pulse spiked. Oh no. Do I tell him I'm not there? God, no, then I'll have to explain why. More lies. Very bad idea. Suddenly her head was the clearest it had been in ages, and after a few quick calculations and checking of time and train timetable, knew what she needed to do. Okay, but I'll be a bit late, 5:30-ish. No problem, was David's reply. Sorry, Bill, change of plans, she said, and leapt off the couch. She could make it if she hurried. Breaking the news in a public place was a good idea. David didn't do scenes, ever. Maybe he was celebrating a promotion or a bonus and she'd be able to feel less guilty about quitting. In their bedroom, Alice was just about to drag on her jeans when she realised her error. I'm meant to be coming straight from work. I don't wear jeans to work. At that moment, she felt a new stab of guilt under her ribs. White lies are okay if they're told to protect someone from pain, a wise person had once said. So this is okay, isn't it? She told herself. Oh, God. She was starting to break out in a nervous sweat. Stay, good dog, she said to Bill, as she left with 1 minute up her sleeve. She only hoped the train was running on time. Alice's knees were practically knocking when she sat down and the train doors clunked shut behind her. She fiddled with her handbag strap and tapped and shifted her feet. Thankfully, the carriage was nearly empty and there weren't too many people to stare at her. Should I tell him as soon as I get in the car or wait until dinner? And if waiting until dinner, before ordering or eating or after? Shit. Alice was beginning to regret not telling him straight away that morning. Despite the crisp, cold evening, she was hot and a little clammy under her arms by the time she'd made her way to the building where Gold, Taylor and Murphy had their offices. Waiting at the lights with the imposing modern tower looming high above, the glass and steel glinting in the late afternoon sun, needles of nervous energy began to dart through her. Her breath kept catching. She didn't want to go anywhere near the place. Certainly she didn't want to see anyone she knew. She almost didn't walk forward when the light for pedestrians went green, but a bump from people around her, expecting her to move, propelled her onwards and across the street. Oh, shit. She darted behind the little street vendor stall that sold magazines as a group of Gold, Taylor and Murphy employees spilled out onto the street. She stayed half-turned away and kept her head down while carefully examining the magazines as she prayed for the group to move away. Not a library, you buy, the man behind the counter said. Alice cast a covert glance towards the building's main doors. Damn it. They were milling, not dispersing. Putting her head down again, she fished in her handbag for her wallet, opened it up and bought the nearest magazine with bold headlines about some scandal involving Tom Cruise. She stepped aside and opened it up. She just hoped David would pull up here ahead of the taxi rank and not park illegally right in front of the building and her previous co-workers. Not that she knew any of them all that well. Uh-oh. She'd just spied Pip and Jared coming out and joining the throng. She turned nervously at hearing a honk, but almost turned back when all she saw was a taxi pulling up. The back passenger door opened and she heard David call her name. She stuffed the magazine into her handbag as she leapt in beside him. She didn't know the two men who were with David in the car. "Hey," she said. "Tom, William, this is Alice." "Hi," Alice called as a general greeting and pulled her seatbelt on. Clearly David was planning a big night if he was leaving the car at work. Alice wasn't sure if this was better or worse for her situation. Ordinarily she hated drunkenness, but tonight it might actually help her. "Good day," David said as the cab pulled away from the curb, and Alice let out a slight sigh of relief that no one from the office seemed to have noticed her. "Yep, you?" "Not bad. The usual. You know, Tom and Will have flown in from Auckland." "Great. Welcome," she said. She was beginning to feel desperate to unload her news, to get it and whatever consequences came with it out of the way. But now she'd have to be in hostess mode, charming, friendly, and definitely not on edge like she currently was. Was it noticeable? Hopefully she just seemed a little tense after a big day, a big week. They joined the peak hour crawl through the city and then the amble along St Kilda Road. All the time David was pointing out things to the men, the National Gallery, places to visit and eat, landmarks of note. Were they clients or colleagues? Alice tried to remember if David had said. It didn't really matter either way. She couldn't say anything now. He would be mortified to learn news like this in front of others. While he projected a very together, polished facade, she wondered if he was actually quite insecure and fragile inside. A couple of times she'd been stunned to find him practically reduced to a bumbling little boy, usually the result of a bad golf hole or round, or when a project he was managing wasn't quite going to plan. "So, what do you do, Alice?" Will asked from the front seat, half turning around to look at her. Well, funny you should mention my work, she thought to say. Oh, the temptation. "There, look!" David cried, pointing before Alice could answer. "Alice is PA to her. They're on the billboard. Carmel Gold, real estate agent extraordinaire." "Oh, wow," Will said. "Cool," Tom said. Alice groaned inwardly. Oh, if only she'd rung him that morning. Telling lies by omission or in whatever form was tying her in knots. She thought she might even be close to throwing up if she didn't keep her wits about her. She'd had 2 of Lauren's cupcakes for lunch and nothing else and was now regretting it. "She looks formidable," Will said. "Yeah, I bet she keeps you on your toes," Tom said. "Oh, you have no idea." "Yes, I've only been there a few," she said. "And she's training Alice up to be an agent," David said proudly. "Well, down the track a bit. I'm still on probation," Alice said, after swallowing down the rising bile. Walking into their favourite St Kilda restaurant, they were shown to a great table, which Alice took as a good sign. Hopefully the churning in her stomach would stop after a hearty meal. Oh, how she wished she was still home in her trackies on the couch with Bill. When they ordered quickly, Alice felt renewed hope that it wouldn't be a late night. But David had chosen to catch a cab, so no doubt he'd make the most of that decision. She was both relieved and disappointed to discover that Tom and Will were his colleagues. Relieved because it meant less pressure on her to impress them, and disappointed because David probably didn't need to either, and so he could let loose. Weighing it up, she decided it was probably better that they were his colleagues. Then she wouldn't be under the same scrutiny, from David as much as from the 2 men, that she would be if they were clients. Small mercies. Unfortunately, towards the end of the meal, as they were considering the dessert menu, someone suggested a round of shots. Alice cringed. She was already feeling queasy and tipsy thanks to her cupcake overdosing and the red wine during the main course. After much goading from the men and much resistance from her, Alice agreed to 1 round, instantly cursing her weakness in submitting to peer pressure. But in some dark part of her brain, she was hoping that by appearing to have a great night and heartily joining in, David might be more receptive to her news later. Or was she just finally unwinding, letting go of all the tension that had been consuming her? Usually she hardly drank more than a glass or 2 of wine with a meal. At least they didn't choose tequila. That would have seen Alice throw up for sure. She loved licorice, so the black sambuca went down well. And the second. Before she gave it too much thought, they'd all bought a round. Well, each put a round on their table's tab, presumably for the company credit card, and they were laughing with more uproar than was necessary at how black their lips were. Suddenly the men were telling stories about colleagues in common and project stuff-ups, laughing like they were the funniest stories they'd heard in decades. Getting bolder and bolder about things they'd told their previous bosses. Each man was bragging loudly, seemingly trying to outdo each other. Alice was happy to sit and listen. She was suddenly feeling very, very drunk.
"Come on, Alice, surely you've got a horrible previous boss story," Tom said. "Alice has been out of the workforce for a while at uni, so she doesn't have a bad boss story," David said.
"Actually," Alice said, and told them the story about the photocopier assault incident.
"Wow," Tom said.
"It's crazy," Will said, and the mood seemed to fall flat.
"You should have taken that job. You might have been happier,"
David slurred.
"She seems happy enough to me,"
Tom slurred and raised his glass to Alice with a wink and a smile. Alice smiled back. "Thanks, Tom."
"Doesn't stop her complaining all the time, though, does it?"
David said, and then rolled his head back.
"Ha ha, David's the first one to go,"
Tom said, and cheered, and Will joined in. Then they promptly ordered another round. "Actually," Alice said, breaking into the silence, "you don't need to worry about me complaining anymore, David. I quit today." So there. How do you like that? That'll teach you for putting me down in front of your friends. For a split second she felt victorious, but in the next she felt awful.
"Oh," Tom said. Good for you."
"Yeah, go Alice," Will said with very little enthusiasm. Suddenly everyone seemed completely sober, except Alice. Her head was swimming, but perhaps that wasn't because of the alcohol.
"You did what?"
David said, straightening up, glaring at her. "Quit. I quit."
"Fuck! Without discussing it with me?"
"Well, you did say if I was really not happy, and I wasn't. I was miserable. Carmel Gold is a bitch."
"Oh, I think that's our cue to leave,"
Will said, cringing. Out of the corner of her eye, Alice saw him signal a waiter.
"Yep," Tom said. "Can we get the bill, please?"
he asked the waiter who had come over. Jesus, David, say something. Alice wasn't sure if she'd said the words aloud or not. A part of her was glad her secret was out. Another part of her was alarmed by the look on David's face which she couldn't quite read. White-hot anger? Had she seen that expression before, she wondered as she searched her memory. Before long they were outside shaking hands, exchanging grunting, slurred pleasantries, and then piling into 2 taxis, one for her and David and one for Tom and Will. Alice gave the driver their address. David remained silent and stayed that way for the entire trip. At home they stood side by side and cleaned their teeth without a word, and then climbed into bed and rolled over with their backs to each other. Alice's head was spinning, and she didn't think she'd ever get to sleep. God, what a day. She felt awful about upsetting David, but also glad her news was out. Maybe David was just drunk. Maybe he wouldn't even remember. That thought almost made her laugh out loud. One can hope, though having to tell him again in the morning didn't bear thinking about. Alice left David sleeping to take Bill for a walk. Her head was pounding with a massive hangover headache, but the dog had appeared beside the bed, scratching at her, and she hadn't wanted to risk waking David by telling him no. She figured the longer they avoided talking about last night, the better. When she returned, the paracetamol and water had taken effect, and she was starting to feel less queasy. The fresh, crisp morning air, while an initial shock to her system, had helped too. David was sitting at the kitchen bench, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug when she entered.
"What's this?"
he said, pointing to the container of cupcakes on the bench. Alice cursed to herself. They had cream in them, and she'd forgotten to put them in the fridge. Were they still edible? "Lauren brought them over yesterday to commiserate with me about quitting."
"I thought you'd have been celebrating,"
David said icily. Well, that too she wanted to say, but didn't. David was angry, and clearly he hadn't forgotten the bombshell she'd dropped publicly the night before. "So, hang on," he said. "You didn't quit yesterday afternoon at the end of the day?" "No. I couldn't make myself go at all. I'm sorry, David, I just couldn't." "So you had all day to tell me, but you didn't? You waited to blurt it out in front of strangers? How do you think that made me look, Alice?" "David, they were fine. That's not the point." "Wait a second. You were dressed for work when I picked you up from the office. Why would you—" His eyes were as big as saucers, suddenly full of comprehension. Alice couldn't hold his stare. She went over and busied herself with the coffee machine, which thankfully required some attention before completing its task. "Oh, my God. Alice, I can't believe the level of your deception. I don't even know who you are anymore." She began, but he held up his hand. "I can't even look at you right now. I'm going to the office." "But it's Saturday." "Fine, just run away, David." When Alice could ignore the itching guilt of quitting and upsetting David, she felt light and exhilarated with her decision. She was determined not to let David's scolding ruin her day. He hadn't been the one working for Carmel Gold, and if he'd been more understanding, maybe she wouldn't have blurted her news out like that at dinner. No matter what he said, she still felt right about leaving. Free. God, it felt good to be free. While she hadn't been physically cooped up, she actually felt as if she had. It was like she wanted to throw the doors and windows open after a long, cold, damp winter and run out into the sun and warm air with her face raised and her arms outstretched, and run and run and run. She was brimming with energy, desperate to be spent. After walking Bill, she tied him up and ran some laps of the oval and did some push-ups and other exercises on the equipment in the park. But she still felt the need to keep moving and be around people. She took Bill home and collected her swimming things and a clean set of clothes. A serious workout at the pool finally helped her to feel more settled and clear-headed. She was thrilled when Lauren returned her text saying yes to brunch at Alice and David's favourite cafe near the market. "Hiya," Lauren said, closing her notebook and moving her bag so Alice could sit down. She half stood and they hugged before sitting down again. "Has David gone away on a work trip again already?" "No, we've had a fight and he's off sulking at the office." "Uh-oh, because of quitting the job, right?" "Yup. But we're not going to talk about it. Everything's always about me when you and I get together lately." "I must say you're very chipper for someone whose partner has—" Alice said, waggling her finger in the air between them. "I'm not ruining this beautiful day talking about it. It will be fine. The sun is shining and soon it will be winter, so we need to make the most of it." "Okay then, got it," Lauren said, grinning, as she picked up the menu. "You seem cheery too, more so than usual. Have you had a writing breakthrough? When do I get to read something? It's been ages." "Do you want to?" "Of course." "Well, I'm a little chuffed with what I've just done, actually," Lauren said shyly. "It just came out." Alice admired the serene look on Lauren's face, the complete and utter contentment. "Here you are," she said, opening her notebook and pushing it across the table to Alice. "It's not very long. Please don't feel you have to show me. I'm cool, but don't feel you have to read it." Alice let out a laugh. "Listen to us dancing around. Lauren, I would absolutely love to read your piece. It would be a privilege, especially because I just know that one day you're going to be famous." "You're too sweet." "Well, I'm working on it. Tell you what, I'll go in order and you read. I can't bear to sit and watch you." "That's a good plan. I'm not keen on you hovering over me like a hawk either. Here," Alice said, fishing her wallet out and extracting some notes. "I'll have the eggs and bacon on sourdough, an OJ, and a latte." "Snap! Me too. Be back in a bit." Alice smiled as she watched Lauren practically skip her way to the counter, darting between the closely packed tables and other patrons. Then she started to read Lauren's story titled Day from Hell. From the first line, Alice felt herself being drawn into the plot, and the activity and noise in the cafe seeped far away into the background. She was gripped by the story of Matilda, a young woman walking down an alley after a late night out who had just heard footsteps behind her. Alice's heart raced along with Matilda's. She urged Matilda to get her mobile out of her bag, or better yet, a can of pepper spray or mini deodorant. Alice read on, a hand at her throat, fiddling with her necklace, a habit she had when reading and engrossed. As she read, she didn't even notice Lauren sit back down opposite her. Alice's heart almost stopped as Matilda turned the corner into a blind dead end, a high brick wall in front of her, leaving her nowhere to go. And then there were more footsteps, running. Alice was hearing everything she was reading on the page as clearly as if it were a movie. Suddenly a voice shouted, "Stop! Police! You're surrounded! Put the knife down!" There was a clatter of metal on cobblestone. "Jason Parks, you are under arrest for stalking." Alice didn't realise she was holding her breath until she let it out along with Matilda as she slumped into the arms of a burly police officer. She was safe after 2 years of fear. "You were really brave. It's over now," the officer said, letting her sob into his chest before gently easing her away. Alice felt tears of relief and sympathy for Matilda gathering in her eyes and quickly wiped them away. She looked up from the page and took a few moments to get her bearings. She'd been there with Matilda in that alley. She blinked a few times and took a couple of deep breaths. She glanced across at Lauren, who was clearly trying to not look at her. "Wow, Lauren, that was incredible. I was right there with her. I heard and felt everything. I'd swear it was a much longer piece," she said, flicking back the pages she hadn't remembered turning. "In a good way. It was so intense." "Thanks so much. I really appreciate you saying that." "Thank you for letting me read it. It really is fantastic. Are you going to send it out to a competition or a magazine or somewhere?" "No, it was just a writing exercise about fear." "Well, you nailed it. Look at me, I'm a wreck. My heart was racing and I started to sweat," Alice said, fanning her face with both hands. "Lucky it wasn't a sex scene," she said with a laugh, starting to feel a little self-conscious at how affected she'd become. "Oh, bless. I'm serious, Lauren. The whole world needs to experience your stories." "Well, I don't know about that." "Please don't hide your talent away and wait for an idea for a novel. You move people, Lauren. You're good, really good." "Thanks. I'll think about it," Lauren said, becoming visibly embarrassed. After brunch, they walked the aisles of the market and filled their shopping bags before saying goodbye. Still feeling upbeat from her time out with Lauren, Alice was cooking a rich, creamy chicken, mushroom and garlic pasta sauce for dinner. She would use the meal to try to make amends, and she hoped David would be in a better mood when he arrived home. "Fingers crossed the way to a man's heart really is through his stomach, Bill," she said to the dog lying in his bed nearby. "Hi, how was your day?" Alice said, half turning from the stove with spatula in hand when she heard David's footsteps behind her. There was silence. She turned back to the stove. She could hear him moving stuff around on the bench and then plugging his phone in to charge. "Dinner won't be long. Can you set the table? And feed Bill?" Again she was met with silence. David walked around her to dish out dry food for Bill and then get placemats and cutlery out and set the table. After that he sat down in silence. Alice quietly dished up their meals and joined him. She stared at David as he started eating without looking at her and without uttering a word. "David, are you seriously giving me the silent treatment? How bloody childish." "Well, I don't know what you want me to say," he said indignantly. "I don't know. How about talk to me?" "There seems no point discussing your employment. You've made your decision, which I might add you chose not to discuss with me." "Jesus, David, would you listen to yourself? I told you I couldn't do it for another day. And before that, I did discuss it. But you chose to be condescending or not hear me. Did you actually listen to me, David? I told you how I was feeling." "Come on, Alice, it was 4 weeks. It can't have been that bad. You were practically complaining from day one." I was discussing how I was feeling from day one, David. I was trying to work through it, make it work. Seriously, do you ever listen to me? Of course I listened to you. But Alice, you didn't give the job or Carmel a chance. You weren't there. Tears filled her eyes. It would be nice if you cared enough to offer a little sympathy. You don't have to agree, but as my partner, you should at least care when I'm upset or hurting. Of course I care, Alice. Don't be melodramatic. But let's get real here. You didn't really want the job. You don't want any job. You'd rather stay bludging at university. But you need to join the real world again. You've had your time to slack off and find yourself. I've carried you for long enough. I was genuinely excited about the job and the possibility of a career in real estate, remember? But what was the point? David had clearly made up his mind about how he wanted to remember things. Not everything is about big money, David. I've always earned something. And what about all the emotional support I provide? All the housework and other stuff I do to keep things going while you do all your travelling, putting the almighty company first? What do you think pays for this roof over your head? And the apartment before this? You can't live on air and dreams alone, Alice. Or emotional support, he added with a sneer. Alice was so flabbergasted and angry her tears stopped. Who are you, she thought. But of course she knew. She'd known all along. She'd just chosen to ignore that side of him and choose the path forward that looked so different from where she'd come from. What's really sad is that you'd have me stay in a job where I'm miserable, Alice said sadly. Of course I wouldn't. Stop being ridiculous, Alice. I just think you need to be a bit realistic. Full-time employment isn't like being at university. It can be hard, not always enjoyable, and can take some getting used to. Don't talk to me as if I'm a child, David. I have been employed full-time before, you know. Well, your behaviour last night in announcing you'd quit was pretty immature from where I was sitting. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to. But David wasn't listening. Intentionally trying to make me look bad. Like I'm out of touch with what's going on in my own relationship, in front of my colleagues. Let's talk about who doesn't care. You don't seem to care about how much embarrassment you caused me. Jesus, David, not everything is about you. And if you listened to me, really listened, then maybe I wouldn't have had to shock you into feeling something. I feel something, Alice. Disappointment. In you and your petty behaviour. Actually, I'm going for a bike ride. I'll see you later. Alice stared, stunned, as he pushed himself back from the table and got up, tugged his phone away from the charging cable and strode down the hall. Having moved her food around her bowl and only managed to eat about half her meal, Alice put the leftovers in the fridge and tidied the kitchen. She felt sick with how things had gone with David and worried about him being out on the road in the dark in an angry, distracted state. Why couldn't he understand? She picked up her phone from the top of the bench and tapped out a text. I'm sorry. Please don't be angry with me. Heart, kiss, kiss. She sat nervously waiting, hoping for a reply, while aimlessly scrolling through her Facebook feed. When the reply came, she stared at it, her heart sinking even further. Home later. Just remember, Alice, I'm not the enemy. D. Not the enemy? What was that supposed to mean? Alice shook her head. Oh, well, at least he'd answered. Hopefully his rejection of her might be over soon. She should have known better than to hope for an olive branch. David never used terms of endearment or affection, and he never apologised. To the best of her knowledge, Alice hadn't ever heard the words I'm sorry pass David's lips. Chapter 19. On Sunday, David took himself off to play golf. Alice briefly considered going with him in an effort to placate his still frosty mood, but she'd decided she'd apologised enough for something she didn't think she should even have to apologise for. OK, sure, she really shouldn't have announced her news in the way she had, and she'd apologised for that, but if he listened to her, really listened and actually heard and understood, had some compassion, then she wouldn't have had to. Alice found herself trying to work out if David had always been so self-centered. Perhaps the gloss was just wearing off and they were settling into more of a companionship-type relationship. God, it's been 4 years. We're in our 30s, not our 60s. How would it be when they had kids? David definitely wanted kids. Alice knew that, though she wondered if it was more about appearing successful in another area of life. Great job, big house, nice car, and a couple of kids. Alice thought she could take or leave having a family, but if she was going to do it, she wanted to be married first. And David had said he didn't believe in marriage because he was an atheist. Alice wasn't religious, but she liked and respected tradition. So they'd been at a stalemate and hadn't discussed it for the last year or so. She didn't mind not having to make a decision about having children. She'd been focused on her studies. Perhaps if she reconsidered her stance, she wouldn't have to look for a job. Alice felt a little ashamed. She bit her lip. So much for being a feminist and a strong, independent woman. Her phone rang and she was pleased to see Lauren's name on the screen. She sometimes still felt her heart contract ever so briefly at the thought it might be Carmel before realising it wouldn't be. "Hi, Lauren, how's things?" "Hey, Alice. I just wanted to check everything was okay now with David. I sensed it was maybe worse than you were making out. Can you talk or should I call back another time?" "No, now's good." "Oh, Lauren, I'm so glad to hear your voice. David's still furious with me, though I can't entirely blame him. I was an idiot blurting out in public that I'd quit. I didn't mean to, it just happened. He's still barely speaking to me." "Oh, no, that's not good. You'd better start from the beginning." "Are you sure you can be bothered listening to my woes?" "Of course. I rang because I was worried about you." "That's so lovely of you," Alice said. "So," she began. "Wow," Lauren said when she'd finished. "Can see why David reacted the way he did." "I know. I was completely out of line in the restaurant, and I put my hand up to that. But seriously, he just won't let it go. I'm sorry I put you in that position by leaving the cupcakes." "Don't be silly. It's not your fault. And I shouldn't have left them out on the bench anyway. I'm still annoyed that he seems more interested in me having a job than actually being happy. And of course that I dared not to discuss it with him first before I left my job. But I did. Well, not in so many words. Well, not in any words," Alice conceded with a sigh. "But I did discuss being unhappy there and why. And he did say if I wasn't happy to leave, which I now know was reverse psychology or passive aggression or whatever. Anyway, enough of all that. So here I am job hunting online. Did you know that even to wash dishes in a pub kitchen you have to have experience? Same with a job in a factory. I'm doomed. Why would you be looking at those sorts of jobs?" "Well, there's still nothing remotely related to my history degree." "So? You're also a highly prized admin, Wes." "Yeah, right. Thanks for the vote of confidence, but we both know the truth about my situation." "You can't rearrange your whole life based on your experience with Carmel bloody Gold. I think it's safe to say that was unusual, and you'll find a way around the reference problem. What I didn't tell you about Friday, Lauren, was that I was scared to go too close to the building where I worked and I hid from my old colleagues. I'm not joking. I was shaking and sweating, probably terrified. Thank goodness they didn't see me. How bloody embarrassing. It was completely irrational behaviour. Not from where I'm sitting. Alice, you're probably suffering from mild PTSD. Don't be ridiculous. It's not like I've been to war or in an accident or watched someone die or anything. I'm being serious. To your well-educated academic mind, it might seem a relatively minor and short-term ordeal, but it's really hit you hard and deep. You've said that. Remember how you said you felt your world had been turned upside down and you couldn't think straight? And the nightmares. Alice, benign experiences don't give you nightmares. But isn't that just the brain or subconscious or whatever processing things, feelings, what went on that day? That's dreams. I'm sure nightmares aren't normal and certainly aren't good. I had another one last night. I was trapped in the corner of a room with Carmel standing over me, yelling. I couldn't make out what I was in trouble for, and I couldn't get away from her. It was so real. I woke up sweating and wondering where I was. Oh, Alice, where was David? What did he say? He was still up watching TV in the lounge. I didn't tell him. I'm sure the experience is just working its way through my system and I'll be fine in a few days. I hope you're right. If it continues, it might be a good idea to see someone about it. What, like a shrink? A professional counsellor of some sort? Yes. Then David really will call me a drama queen. Oh, God, can you imagine? Alice, don't dismiss it too quickly. If it's going to interfere with your life going forward, then it would be a good idea to talk to someone and work through it. You'd always have me, of course, but a different, neutral perspective might be useful too. Lauren? Yes? I'm sensing you knew how David would react. That's why you called, isn't it? You said you were worried about me. I had a feeling. Don't tell me you're psychic, Lauren. You've never even met him, have you? I'm not psychic, but I'd had my suspicions that he's a bit of a control freak. Just things you said along the way. And remember, he's been to all 3 of our Christmas dinners, so I've actually met him a few times and seen you two interact. Oh, that's right, of course you have. Yeah, I guess that's a fair description of him. And seeing your house on Friday sort of confirmed it. Because he's a neat-nick bordering on obsessive? I can see how you came to that conclusion, Alice said. It wasn't just that. Oh, what else? Alice, have you ever noticed that in all the photos of the 2 of you on display in your place, he is always standing behind you with his hands on your shoulders? Really? That's because he's slightly taller, Alice said, making her way out into the hall and down towards the living area. Fair enough, but he doesn't ever have his arms around you and he's never kissing you or showing any affection. I just noticed it, that's all. I might be reading too much into it. Oh my God, she's right. Alice stared at the framed photos lined up along the pale timber sideboard and felt a cold sensation snake through her. Not quite, but sort of, fear. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry. Just all me being a nosy writer. Now you've pointed it out, it does seem a little bizarre. I've always thought it nice to feel his strength, his steadying influence behind me, Alice said truthfully, unable to drag her gaze away from the photos. Well, there you go. We all read things differently. Forget I said anything. This is me just overthinking things and blowing them out of proportion. I was just worried about you. I hope everything will be okay soon. Honestly, I'm not sure it will be. The atmosphere here is pretty Arctic and probably will be until I get another job and stick with it. Speaking of which, I'd better get back to my job search. But while her voice was strong, Alice felt the unnerving sense that the ground was shifting under her and that she'd discovered something that had or would irrevocably change things. It's Sunday, Alice. Give yourself a break, and you only quit on Friday. I know, but sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing at all. Take a deep breath, let the universe catch up and allow it to do its work. Well, it's up to you, not me. You do what you've got to do. Let me know if you want to catch up sometime. And remember, I'm only a phone call or text away. Thanks so much. It really means a lot that you called to check on me. Ah, what are friends for? There's no need for thanks. You do the same for me. Okay, gotta go. Catch ya. Yeah, speak soon. Alice hung up, feeling grateful, but at the same time unsettled. Lauren's call had brought back into focus her frustration at David's lack of support. She also still couldn't drag her eyes away from the photos. Lauren was right. Every single one of them was the same, and she started to feel a bit annoyed that she hadn't seen it before herself. Now that she thought about it, David did seem controlling. Even his smile in the photos seemed a little intense, barely a smile at all. He'd said from the start he had a problem with showing his teeth because he was embarrassed about them not being perfectly straight. Apparently his parents had run out of money and had to have his braces taken off early. David was still mortified. At both his crooked teeth, which Alice hadn't even noticed until he'd pointed them out, and not coming from a particularly well-off family. It was one of the first things he'd confided in Alice soon after they'd met. She hadn't seen why it was an issue. Her parents certainly hadn't had lots of cash to splash about. She'd thought it great that David had used his upbringing as a reason to strive so hard. But perhaps he'd let it go to his head. There was a fine line with so many things in life. Oh well, was being very good to her. Everyone had their foibles. Lauren's right, Bill. Job hunting can wait. All the new ones will probably go online on Monday anyway. What David didn't know wouldn't hurt him, she thought, a little guiltily. Also, how would she sell herself, even in her cover letter, if she didn't get her head straight? This is the end of CD 4. The book continues on CD 5. CD 5. Chapter 20. By Thursday, Alice was so frustrated and despondent about the job hunt that she spent most of her time in tears. She'd wanted to call Lauren, if only to hear a friendly, sympathetic voice, but didn't want to be the sort of friend who only ever called to moan. That had never been Alice's way before, but it was now. The thought of how different she was from the cheerful, optimistic person at uni made her feel downright depressed. Would she ever be like that again? She couldn't see how she could drag herself back, other than getting and keeping a good job, and right now that seemed as likely as finding a box full of hen's teeth. At least David didn't seem angry with her anymore, though he'd as good as given up asking about her day in a way that elicited any discussion of feelings. Instead, he asked for a rundown of what she'd done, as if she were answerable to him and needed to account for her time, which she thought morosely she pretty much was. She wasn't bringing in any money, and she knew all too well money was power. When a text from Lauren arrived, Alice almost leapt with joy. "I'm in the area. Are you home? If so, can I get the Tupperware container? Kiss, kiss. I'm here. Would love to see you. Be warned, though, there are tears. Kiss, kiss. Oh no, what's happened? I'll tell you when you get here. I'm okay, just feeling sorry for myself. Kiss, kiss." "You've no idea how good it is to see you, Lauren," Alice said as she opened the door and then pulled her friend to her. She wasn't surprised to find herself sobbing into Lauren's shoulder. There seemed an almost constant flow of tears down Alice's face these days. "Alice, what's going on?" Lauren said when they'd parted. "I'm not in a rush. How about I come in and you tell me all about it? Unless you're busy." "Busy? You're kidding, right? I'm unemployed, remember?" Alice said as she led the way through to the kitchen. "So anything promising?" "No. And it's worse than I thought. I relented about going back to an office and rang all the main temp agencies. Can you believe every one of them said not to bother coming in if I don't have a reference from my last direct report?" "Why would you tell them you didn't have one?" "I'm no good at lying, Lauren, and I thought if I was honest and upfront they'd find a way around it. So much for honesty being the best policy. I'm a damned good proposition. Why wouldn't they bloody well want to help me? It's as much their gain as mine. At least you're starting to believe in yourself. That's a step forward. More resigned to the fact that admin is all I know, and admin jobs are with people and in offices, so I don't really have a choice." "I'm sure you have plenty of transferable skills, Alice. You just need to be in the right frame of mind to think of them." "Exactly. At the moment I feel like I'm teetering on the top of a slippery slope. I'm angry with Carmel for doing this to me, making me like this. I'm still a basket case and a bloody mess most of the time, and I'm angry at myself for allowing her to do this to me. And I hate the world for making life so damned hard at the moment. There, listen to me feeling sorry for myself." "I think you're allowed to feel crushed and sad and whatever else, Alice. You can't help your emotions," Lauren said gently. "Is David being more supportive now?" "Yes. No. I don't know, to be honest. I have a horrible feeling this is as good as it gets with him. And even worse, I think this is how he's always been, and now I'm seeing it because life's not all going perfectly to plan. Sorry, I'm not really making any sense. That seems to be me these days. I'm still all over the bloody place. I think David's always been the same. Unemotional and only supportive in his own black and white way. He's not being unkind. He's being David. Oh, I don't know, I can't explain it, but I don't think it's personal, towards me, that is. So you think perhaps he had everything mapped out, and because he's so ordered, he's not responding well to things not working out as planned? Yes, that might be part of it. But he's always saying that if something doesn't work, you find a way around it. He's always going on about solutions and thinking outside the box. Maybe that's what he wants to believe, but it isn't working like that. Sorry? I'm not following. You know how people often have mantras? Well, sometimes I think those mantras are for things they want to achieve, be, not where they currently are. Oh, I see. I think. Kind of like wishful thinking? Exactly. Insecure people project feelings onto other people. Sorry if I'm overstepping, but in my mind he's showing some insecurity in the way he's reacted to you quitting. And there's a need to control you to a certain extent. What I'm saying is that while you think he seems disappointed in you, I think he's more likely to be disappointed in himself for some reason. It's called projection. He's probably annoyed with himself for choosing a partner who's not driven to be successful in the corporate world like he is. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to be rich, not have to worry about money, but I see what it does to him and some of our friends, and honestly, I'm not sure that's what I want for myself. I thought I did, but with the big salaries you seem to lose your soul to a bit, don't you? Maybe. I'm sure there are good companies out there. Alice, don't let one experience change your whole perspective. Honestly, I don't know what to think anymore, but I'm sure I'm not living up to David's expectations. I don't like that you're giving him so much power over you. You're your own person. You're the only one whose expectations you have to meet. I'm not sure being in a committed partnership works quite like that. Lauren, I'm so confused and lost. At that moment, Alice's mobile phone began to ring. Oh, she said, picking it up and seeing Mum Mobile on the screen. That's odd. Why is she ringing me when I should be at work? She said. Hi, Mum, what's up? I thought you weren't meant to answer your phone to personal calls at work. I was going to leave a voicemail message. Alice cringed. She was being far too sensitive, but everything her mother said sounded like a rebuke. Well, I don't have long. What's up? She repeated. I just thought you should know Ruth Stanley died. A sudden heart attack, apparently. Oh, no. Alice's heart clenched painfully. Her chin wobbled and tears began to stream down her face. When's the funeral? Tuesday. What time? 2:00. But you won't be able to make it if you're working. Surely not. I can see if they'll give me time off, Alice said, cursing the utterance of yet another lie, and in front of Lauren. Oh, I'd have thought you wouldn't have been there long enough. Well, it is a funeral. Yes, but Ruth wasn't family, was she? Maybe not to you. Suddenly Alice was desperate to get off the phone and give in to the sobbing that was lodged tight in her throat. Look, Mum, I need to go. I'll talk to you later. Well, let me know if you decide to come and need picking up from the plane. Okay, thanks for ringing and letting me know. Alice hung up and sat staring at the phone in her hand. Oh my God, Ruth. No. What? What's happened? Lauren asked. Alice looked at Lauren, her brow furrowed and her bottom lip quivering. God, Alice, what's happened? You're scaring me. One of my really special friends back at home had a heart attack. She died. Oh no, I'm so sorry, Lauren said, holding out her arms. Oh God, Alice said, crumpling into Lauren's embrace. She was there for me when my marriage ended, when my family wasn't. You know, I probably would never have had the courage to leave Hope Springs if it hadn't been for Ruth. I feel so bad that I haven't kept in touch more these past couple of years, especially in recent months. Well, it's hard with distance. I meant to call her the other day. Was she a friend from school? That's young to have a heart attack. Oh, no. Ruth and her family were close friends with my parents for as long as I can remember. She was like a second mother to me. When Mum was always cold and unemotional, Ruth was warm and loving. She was always there for me. God, Lauren, I can't believe she's gone. Was your mother upset? From what I was listening to, she didn't seem it. No, Dawn doesn't do emotion, ever. It's good that she rang to tell you. That'll be so I didn't hear from anyone else first. And also as a punishment. Alice coloured. The words were out without her thinking. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You must think I'm awful. Not at all. I am so lucky to have great parents I adore and who adore me, but I know it's not the same for everyone. And Brett certainly opened my eyes the other week, Lauren said. Brett's really opened my eyes too. Once Alice had taken on board what Brett had said about Carmel, she dug deeper, going from website to website. Part of her was hoping to prove him wrong, while another part was intrigued. She felt like jigsaw puzzle pieces in her life were finally falling into place. The internet was full of the subject. She wished she'd been surprised or horrified to discover she might have been born to a narcissist, but thought deep down she'd probably always known. She'd just never had the name for it. She'd always known that in her mother's eyes her sister Olivia was the golden child, but it seemed Alice might be what was called a scapegoat within the narcissistic family dynamic. Coming to this realization made so much about her and her upbringing make sense. It was both comforting and disconcerting. She still didn't want to believe it, especially how damaged she might be. She didn't want to believe that she'd been as good as programmed to choose the wrong men thanks to her mother. But look what had happened with Rick. David was so different and their relationship was nothing like what she and Rick had had. Was it? She mentally shook her thoughts aside. What he said about his family rings so true for me too, the more I think about it, Alice said. I've also been doing a heap of digging online and stumbled on this great site about the daughters of narcissistic mothers. I didn't want it to be true. I just thought Mum didn't like me, not that she might actually have some sort of disorder. I've never felt that I could do anything right in her eyes, no matter what I did or how hard I tried. She's always been a bully, but of course no one else ever saw it. She was like Carmel, bullying and competitive. Alice shuddered at the memory of her time with Carmel and how similar her own mother was in personality to the horrible woman. Anyway, Mum always had a problem with my friendship with Ruth. You reckon David's insecure, Alice said. He's got nothing on my mother. For years, Ruth and I had to pretend we didn't speak to each other quite so often because Mum would get all miffed about it. I'm sure Ruth would have understood if you were so close for years and she knew your mum well, so don't be too hard on yourself. Are you going to go to the funeral? Yes, I really want to be there. But God, I'm not very good at spontaneity. It's only on Tuesday. Alice's head began to spin with trying to start making plans. Do you mind if I call David? Of course not. Actually, I'll go so you can focus on the arrangements, she said, picking up her bag and the plastic container. No, don't. He probably won't even answer. Actually, I'll email him. Alice quickly tapped out her message. Hi, David. Mum just rang to say Ruth Stanley died this morning. You remember Ruth? It was Ruth and Thomas's house where we had Mum's birthday last year. Anyway, the funeral is in Hope Springs at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, and I really want to be there. Can I please book flights using FF points? Thanks, Alice. Kiss, kiss. Alice cringed a little at the bluntness and presumptuousness of her message. But maybe Lauren was right, and she had been letting David have too much power. And she really did want to be there to say goodbye to Ruth, as hard and as horrible as it will be. David will go with you, won't he? I wish. No, he won't want to be away from work. Oh, wow. I'm used to it. It doesn't mean I like it, but I'm used to it. But what about giving you some emotional support? Funerals are horrible. I couldn't imagine going all that way to a funeral on my own. But at least I guess you'll be with your family. Though if your mum's... Hey, do you want me to go with you? I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not. I'm offering. I'm your friend. I want to help. It's really kind of you, but I couldn't expect you to stump up for flights, and David would have a fit if I asked him to use more frequent flyer points. Not that I think he's allowed to use them for anyone other than immediate family. Thanks, but I'll be fine. If you're sure, I'll have to be. Okay. I'll go now and let you sort this out. Call if you need me. I'll speak to you soon. I'm so sorry I'm being such a bad friend, Lauren, and making everything about me all the time. Alice, you've got a lot going on and nothing to apologise for. Let me know once you've made your plans. I'll call you later when you've had a chance to get your head around it. Did you get my email? Alice asked David that evening, as he came into the kitchen where she was putting the finishing touches on a warm chicken salad for dinner. She was feeling antsy about the tickets and sad about Ruth and struggling to hold back the tears, which had finally eased after flowing on and off all afternoon. Yep, here you go, he said, extracting a printout of the tickets from his briefcase and laying it on the table. You could have at least replied and told me. Discussed it with me. I almost booked them on my credit card. Sorry, I just thought it best to get them booked. And discussed what? You told me when you needed to be there, and I've booked the flights, Alice. Here they are, he said, pointing at the A4 page. Thanks, I really appreciate it. But oh, how I wish you weren't quite so unfeeling. I'm really hurting here, she thought, her eyes full again. Did you allow plenty of time for me to get to and from Port Lincoln? Of course I did. I'm not stupid, Alice. And it's not my fault you're from beyond the back of Whoop Whoop where there are no direct flights. Alice put the plates on the table and picked up the printed page. Are you coming with me? She asked quietly. After Lauren had planted the idea in her head, she'd started to hope he'd surprise her. No? Why would I be going? I can't leave the project now. He stared at her, frowning, a truly mystified look plastered across his face. Alice looked away. Anyway, someone has to look after Bill. Alice nodded as she wiped her damp nose and eyes. You're a big girl. You'll be fine. Your mother will be going, won't she? You don't need me there as the fifth wheel. I'll just be in the way. It's not a date, David. Alice nodded again. She was too scared to speak. The lump stuck in her throat was threatening to explode and cause her to cry uncontrollably. What's wrong? David said. I've just lost one of my oldest friends in the entire world, and you don't seem to even care. Of course I care. I've booked your flights, haven't I? They've cost me a heap of frequent flyer points. It's lucky I'm on silver. It's not something I want to do on my own. You won't be on your own. I'm sure you'll know practically everyone there. Don't you South Australians only ever have 1 degree of separation? He said with a chuckle as he picked up his knife. That wasn't what I meant, Alice said quietly, picking up her own cutlery. Don't know why you'd even think there's a chance I'd be able to go. You know how busy I am at work. And you wanted a dog, remember? Someone has to stay and look after him. There are kennels and people who can come in and walk him. Alice, I'm not going, and that's that. She was your friend. I barely knew her. Maybe it would be good for you to get away on your own and think about things. The words, and get your act together, seemed to hang unspoken between them. While they hadn't been spoken aloud, Alice thought David was sounding just like her mother, who had often said things like, go off and brighten your ideas up, and I'll give you something to cry about if you don't stop that snivelling. But he hadn't said any of those things, had he? She was being overly sensitive. Something else her mother had told her 1,000,000 times growing up. But where was her hug? Why hadn't he come in, wrapped his arms around her and said something like, Darling, you must be devastated. I'm so sorry for your loss. So sorry you have to go through all this on top of everything else. What can I do to make you feel better? Alice sighed. It's been nearly 4 years. As if he's going to magically change and suddenly become a romantic, touchy-feely, sensitive guy, Alice. You knew what he was when you met, and he was everything you wanted, remember? She took a deep breath in an effort to steady herself and swallow back the tears. Maybe getting away and the distraction of travelling and being alone for a couple of days would be good for her. If only she wasn't staying with her mother. Alice, I don't know what else you want from me. I'm sorry you're sad, but it's okay, David. I know. I get it. Thanks very much for the flights. I'm just sad. I'm going to miss Ruth. But you hardly ever spoke to her. When did you last call her? How can you miss someone you... Maybe if David had lost someone close to him, he'd understand how she was feeling. Like her soul was being slowly torn out in one long piece, her entire insides being seared as it went. Alice really did feel as if she'd lost a chunk of herself from deep within. She hadn't spoken to Ruth in about 6 weeks, and she felt terribly sad and guilty about that. But she already felt a gaping hole within her life where Ruth had been. She realised she felt as if she'd actually just lost her mother and stifled a gasp. Ruth had taken her to buy her first bra because Dawn had been working and didn't think it was important to find the time to go with her. And Ruth had asked her how she felt about things and listened to her answers. Really listened. It was Ruth, not Dawn, who had hugged her the night her dad had died and at the funeral. Dawn had been too busy being stoic. It had been Ruth who'd held Alice's hand after her marriage ended and said, "It will be okay. You will be okay." And she'd actually tried to do something constructive to help her recover, when Alice's own mother had just stood with her hands on her hips, glaring at her, and as good as said the words, "You are a disgrace to this family." Utterly bereft and devastated by the abandonment, Alice had tried hard to not let the memory settle within her, but it had. Her mother's look of disgust and displeasure. That was when Alice had decided she would never ever rely on or truly confide in her mother again, and she hadn't. Why couldn't Ruth have been her mum instead? How many times had she silently asked that question? I'd better ring Mum and tell her the details of my flights before it gets too late, and check she can pick me up from Port Lincoln, Alice said, getting up and taking her half-empty plate to the sink. I hope so, because I really don't want to pay for a hire car as well. And I really don't want to drive while I'm feeling like this. But Alice kept the words to herself. The truth was, she yearned for David to go with her, stand beside her, just be there for her. She thought about what Lauren had said about the photos and his hands on her shoulders being a sign he was controlling. Well, right now she'd give almost anything for him to provide her some support of any kind. Chapter 21. Alice wasn't surprised when David said he couldn't drive her to the airport, but she was disappointed. He still showed no sign of grasping just how hard this trip would be for her, or he didn't care. She tried not to dwell on that thought. He had already left for work when Alice did a quick mental inventory before wheeling her case outside. Seeing Bill lying down in the passage with the "please don't leave me" look he'd perfected almost made Alice fall apart completely. She was barely holding herself together as it was. For the first time she wished there hadn't been any flights available. Thankfully she'd only be away for a night and 2 days. Alice reminded herself she was always anxious when she travelled. Ordinarily she was stressed, but today she was completely frazzled. At the airport she printed out her boarding pass and made it through security without any dramas and relaxed. She let out a sigh of relief and paused to gather her thoughts and figure out if the Qantas Club lounge was to her left or right. She couldn't remember. In the past she'd always just followed David. Uh-oh. Without him I don't have access. Damn. She'd been counting on sitting in a quiet place to settle her nerves. Alice checked her gate number and its whereabouts before browsing the books in the news agency. When she couldn't settle on a title, she moved on to the coffee stand and bought a latte. She had plenty of time for aimless wandering. In her current state, she'd never settle enough to read anyway. She'd been like this practically since she'd started at Gold, Taylor and Murphy. When would she be normal again? Alice told herself that even without the Carmel experience, she'd be a nervous, distressed mess today. After all, she was heading back to the place she'd practically fled from 4 years ago. Added to that was the fact she would not be having a fortifying cuppa with Ruth when she got there, but had to adjust to never seeing her friend again. She sat down and thought of how Lauren always said she loved airports, especially wondering where the other travellers had come from, where they were going, and making up stories about them in her head. 10 minutes later, Alice had finished her coffee and was restless and bored with waiting and looking for something to do with her hands other than scrolling through Facebook on her phone. She kept going back to the websites on narcissism she'd found too, which probably wasn't healthy. Or maybe it was. She was learning a lot. So back to the bookstore she went, if only to kill some more time and find a prop to keep her hands busy. After standing in front of the shelves deliberating for longer than seemed normal, Alice picked up a novel with a pretty floral cover, figuring it must be by a good author, or at least popular, if the store was expecting to sell as many as the large pile suggested. The book felt nice in her hands when she brought it up to the counter, and when she sat down again she turned it over and over, but had no inclination to open it up and start reading. Her phone pinged with a text message from Lauren. "How are you doing?" "Okay, thanks. So far so good. Kiss, kiss." "You've got this. We'll be thinking of you and sending lots of positive energy. Heart." She knew Lauren would be heading into a lecture soon, so she couldn't phone her. But suddenly Alice wanted to hear a friendly voice and be reassured she would be fine, was doing the right thing, and wouldn't regret this. What she really wanted to do was go back home and see Bill and pretend Ruth wasn't dead and her life generally wasn't a complete mess, wasn't unravelling around her. "Stop it, Alice," she told herself as tears sprang into her eyes. It didn't help that she hadn't slept much. She never did sleep well when she had an alarm set. Her body hated being jolted awake, so she tended to wake on her own accord long before the alarm went off. Alice hadn't read any fiction for years, having had to make her way through so many history texts and non-fiction books for uni. She hadn't read much at all since finishing her degree. Maybe this book would be her way back into what had been one of her favourite things to do since childhood. She turned the paperback over to read the back cover blurb. She had to read it 4 times to fully ascertain that the book was about a young woman who had gained a surprise and very generous inheritance from an unknown relative, and had to decide whether to leave her life and friends behind and move to some small, far-off town, or stay and carry on with life as she knew it. Alice was sufficiently intrigued. She was a little surprised to feel slightly comforted by the book, almost as if she had a friend beside her. She could now see what Lauren meant about making friends with the characters in novels and being sad to say goodbye when the story ended. Lauren had also said that reading was the best way to forget about your troubles for a few hours. She looked up at hearing a muffled announcement about her flight to Adelaide. Alice checked around her to make sure she had everything and joined the milling passengers. On board, she had to jump up and let another passenger into the window seat. She cursed being in the middle. At least her neighbour didn't seem chatty. Upon settling into his seat, he'd instantly opened his book and buried his nose in it. Alice didn't think it would be safe to talk to anyone. If they asked her where she was going and why, she might just dissolve into tears. She went back to Hope Springs for the obligatory occasions like Christmas, well, as few of them as she could get away with. She hadn't been back for at least a year. The last Christmas had been their turn to go to David's family in Sydney. This year they were having a parent-free Christmas and staying home, and catching up with friends who didn't have family in Melbourne or Australia, or for whatever reason were staying put and alone. Alice hadn't broached that with her mother yet. Dawn would show her disapproval, either with loud verbal scorn or quiet tut-tutting and sighs, tightly pursed lips and icy looks. Alice would leave it as close to the event as possible to break the news. Then she wouldn't have to endure too many passive-aggressive phone conversations and attempts at guilt-tripping, and even worse, Dawn deciding to attend and Alice having to explain the concept of family-free. More than likely she'd give in and let her mother attend, as she'd done so many times over the years. "Let's just get through this visit," Alice told herself as she opened her book to the first page and proceeded to read the first 3 lines 7 times before giving up and leaning back into her seat and closing her eyes. Perhaps a catnap would help. Chapter 22. Alice carefully negotiated the rickety fold-down steps of the small plane at Port Lincoln, her legs wonky from the constant vibration under her feet for the past hour. At least the noisy plane had meant she didn't have to speak to the passenger next to her. Alice glanced around her while trying to take an inventory of her feelings. Usually when she came home, as her mum put it, she felt the warmth of nostalgia and the disappointment of regret when remembering how it had all gone so wrong. There was also some sadness that she'd left somewhere she'd loved and knew so well. And then there was always the anxiety and pain over how let down she felt by her mother and sister, and feeling on edge, wondering how they would be this time around. It was a strange sensation to both belong and be an outsider all at once, a very uncomfortable feeling. While Alice loved the quaintness and familiarity of the area and the small town she'd once been a big part of, she also bemoaned her family's lack of will to stretch their beliefs and ways of doing things. When she'd first come back to visit, she'd brought with her so many ideas for the family's corner shop, but had been met with scorn and even horror. "Why would you want to change things? People come here because we represent familiarity," her mother had said. "Yeah, don't come back here to throw your high and mighty ideas around," her sister Olivia had said. She and Olivia had never been best friends, but the animosity had reached new heights over the last few years. Alice's feelings towards Olivia hadn't changed, and she'd tried hard to find some common ground with her. But while her sister seemed interested in hearing about Alice's life, she would often put it down by saying things like, "Well, we can't all drink cafe lattes and sit and listen to lectures. Some of us have to work." Olivia made it sound like she'd been given a life sentence, but she could leave any time she chose to, just like Alice had. Alice would have given her left arm to have had the opportunity to take over the family business that her father had run for so long. That was another thing Olivia, and her mother for that matter, had resented in Alice, her close relationship with their father. It was almost as if they somehow blamed Alice for his death too. She had never felt anything but sympathy and understanding for him in the wake of his suicide. But Olivia and Dawn seemed to take his death and Alice's lack of anger surrounding it as an embarrassing affront and a personal attack. She thought that someone who decided to take their own life most likely didn't do it to punish those around them. They did it to end the pain after having exhausted what they considered to be all other avenues. Alice's mother and sister weren't able to see it that way even now, all these years on, evidenced by the fact Les Hamilton was never referred to. Ever. Alice could see that Dawn's constant control and criticism of her father, as well as trying to run a small business that was struggling to survive because of a transport crisis, had pushed him into desperation, depression, and beyond. As far as she could see, her dad had been doing his best, and it didn't help that shopkeeping wasn't in his blood. He came from a long line of farmers and graziers. But when he'd married into the Proctor clan, Alice supposed his gentle nature had been crushed by their domineering ways. He was never one to go against the grain, so he tried to do as his wife wished. Alice knew he wouldn't have left them unless he felt he didn't have a choice. She and her father had always been close, shared a special bond. Only later did she realize just how much this bond between father and daughter annoyed Olivia and angered their mother. Jealousy was such a nasty, destructive, sad emotion. So it was with mixed feelings that Alice raised her hand in greeting to Olivia as she made her way across the tarmac to the small terminal. They hugged briefly and awkwardly, and then Alice followed Olivia out to the car park and over to where her white sedan was parked. Oh, how she wished her kind, gentle stepfather Frank had come to collect her. "God, I can't believe you came all this way," Olivia said as she pulled her seatbelt on and snapped it shut. "Ruth was a dear friend. She was very special to me," Alice said quietly. "Yes, but still. God, I wish there was a plane direct to Hope Springs," she said with a loud sigh as she turned the key. "It's a lot of mucking about." "I told Mum I could hire a car and drive myself up, but she wouldn't have it. I'm sorry if I've put you out, Olivia," Alice said, folding her arms tight across her chest in an effort to physically hold herself together. Oh, how she ached to give in to the sobbing simmering in her throat. "Well, I hope we make it in time," Olivia said, reversing out of the parking spot. "So, how's David?" "Good. How's Trevor?" Good. Just had man flu, though, so of course it was like he almost died, she said theatrically. You know how it is, she said, rolling her eyes. Alice smiled at the glimpse of the Olivia that could be quite amusing. Bloody big baby. How's the big new house? Good, Alice said. Oh, we got a dog. Did I tell you on the phone? Alice knew she hadn't. She tried to avoid telling them anything personal these days if she could. No? His name's Bill. He's a Jack Russell. A little over 2 years old. We got him from the RSPCA. Oh, I bet he's got problems then. Alice forced herself to not sigh at Olivia's negativity. He's great, actually. Very well behaved and a real character. I miss him already, she added wistfully. It's only a dog, Alice. Wait until you have kids. They drove in silence for a while. Then Olivia pointed out her window. Look at all this new development, she said. Lots of farmers are retiring down here, but they don't want neighbours nearby, so everything's being carved up into 5 or 10 acre strips, she added with clear disapproval. Alice turned and looked, but remained silent. She didn't want to say anything that could lead to any criticism. So tell me about your new job, Olivia said. Not much to tell. It's just admin. Bit more challenging than I've had, though. It's nice not to be a poor uni student, she said, cursing the stream of lies that were slipping so easily off her tongue. I bet. Though uni was your choice, is David travelling a lot? Quite a bit. And he thinks there'll be even more soon, too. You must miss him when he's gone. I wouldn't like it. Yeah, but it's always been that way. I guess I'm just used to it, Alice said. How's Mum? I certainly wouldn't be able to work with her. I'm not sure how you do that. Ah, she's okay. Like you say, it's what you get used to. Oh, I saw your Rick the other week. Olivia, he's hardly my Rick, considering we've been divorced for years. Alice didn't want to ask, but she was a little curious to know about her ex-husband. He's good, in case you're wondering. Got a new lady friend. God, you sound like Mum. Lady friend. Who? Someone local? Nah, an out-of-towner. York Peninsula, I think. He seemed happy enough. That's nice. Alice had never quite got over her mother's disloyalty when she invited Rick for Easter lunch the year after they'd split up, just after Alice had left for Melbourne. She couldn't really explain her objection without sounding mean-spirited, but considering how much pain he'd caused her, Alice thought her mother might have shown more consideration for her feelings. It was almost as if he'd been kept in the family and she'd been exiled, even if it had been her decision to leave the town. If she'd tried to explain it, her mother would have most likely said something idiotic like, "Well, he was hungry, Alice. I wasn't going to turn him away." To be fair, Alice hadn't actually told her mother or Olivia the finer details of her marriage problems and subsequent separation, although she'd figured someone else would have. Doing so wouldn't have garnered any more sympathy. Her mother would have somehow found a way to use the information to ridicule Alice further about her failure. So are Mum and Frank helping to cater for the wake? Yes, but we'll see them at the cemetery first. Thank God for the Stanleys not being religious, so we're spared the church bit. Alice couldn't remember the church part of her father's funeral, apart from just staring at the shiny, dark wooden box with flowers on top, sitting out alone up the front. The whole day was a bit of a blur. But she did remember standing beside her mother and Olivia at the graveside and hearing the clicking of what she thought was a camera. She'd been shocked to turn around and see that someone was in fact taking photos. Apparently, her grandmother, her father's mother, had enlisted one of the cousins to do the honours of digitally capturing the proceedings for posterity. Alice had been horrified. How was that not purely vile and distasteful? And why would you want to? Was it a common thing to do? She had never been able to look at the photos despite being sent a USB stick with them on. Who wanted pictures of crying people, people standing around looking bereft? Her grandmother had been a strange woman, that was for sure, and Alice had never really liked her. Now that she thought about it, Alice couldn't remember if they'd had a wake for her father. They must have, but where? It suddenly seemed terribly important to know, and the more she racked her brain to remember, the harder her heart pounded. She began to struggle for breath. If she didn't pull herself together, she might start hyperventilating. She searched her memories and came up empty. She hated not knowing. It doesn't matter, she told herself. Let it go. Gradually she calmed. Olivia drove on, seemingly unaware of Alice's torment beside her. The rest of the journey was made largely in silence, punctuated by Olivia providing snippets of gossip about people Alice no longer knew or really cared to hear about. Alice tried not to check her watch every 3 seconds, but she was getting a little anxious that they would run late. "It's okay, we're cutting it fine, but I think we'll get there in time," Olivia said. Their mother and Frank were waiting at the gate when they arrived, panting slightly. They'd had to run from where they'd parked the car back in a farmer's empty paddock that had been opened up for extra parking. They would have been right on time otherwise. Alice was pleased to see so many had come to pay their respects to Ruth and her family. "You're late," their mother hissed, looking Alice up and down before giving her a quick hug. Sometimes over the years Alice had wished they'd just dispense with trying to hug and give a wave or nod of the head instead. Her father had been the only one in the family who'd given a big, warm, soft hug. Alice's mum and Olivia gave hugs that were cold and stiff and very abrupt. Thankfully, Frank was better at it, Alice thought, as she sank into his welcoming embrace and leant her cheek against his shoulder. He kissed her head. "We're a little stressed," he whispered, "but she is glad you're here. It's so good to see you, Alice." "Thanks, Frank. It's good to see you too." Alice smiled weakly. Come on, we're late," Dawn said, tottering off at almost a run to catch up with the other mourners. Alice knew her mother would ease her way through to get as close to the front as she could. Dawn was competitive in everything she did and had to be the centre of attention. Oh, if only she had $1 for all the time she'd wanted to say, "Mum, it's not all about you." At least now she had a name for it, and her mother's behaviour made a lot more sense. Alice had an explanation, but not an excuse for the many awful ways in which her mother had treated her over the years. "I'd better keep up," Frank said with an apologetic grimace, patted Alice on the arm, and hurried to catch up. "Come on," Olivia urged. "You go on. I'll catch up." Now she was here, Alice was really struggling to keep herself together. All the memories and feelings of loss for those she'd farewelled here before swamped her, and her composure was slipping dangerously. "Oh, Ruth," she thought sadly. She found a tissue in her bag and dabbed at the tears streaming down her face from under her sunglasses. Her legs were weak and she was fighting for breath against her fitted suit that suddenly felt unbearably tight. At the back of the throng, the funeral director handed her an order of service. He'd officiated at her dad's service and both of her maternal grandparents and most other send-offs in the district. He smiled warmly, then moved on to hand out more of the folded pages. It seemed the service hadn't started yet and she wasn't late after all. Alice let out the slightest sigh of relief. She stared through her tears at the smiling picture of her darling friend Ruth on the cover of the folded sheet, and a pang of sadness gripped her stomach so hard it took all her will not to double over. She straightened up and turned to her left and then her right to acknowledge the people beside her. Then the music started. Alice couldn't sing, she could barely breathe, and so she stood, gulping air and trying not to hyperventilate through the tears. Why did people have to play nice music at funerals and ruin the tunes for whenever you heard them in the future? Like Morning Has Broken, which Alice suddenly remembered had been played at her father's funeral. Or had it? Perhaps it was at one of the services they'd held for her grandparents. Regardless, she hated that song now. Just hearing the tune made her well up. Alice estimated she knew 90% of the mourners around her. Here she was amongst friends, people she'd grown up with, had known all of her life until leaving. People she loved, she thought, smiling warmly and nodding to an old favourite aunt. But with a shock, Alice realised she'd never felt so lonely. She was fine on her own. She was used to David travelling and rarely pined for him. But this was different. This was a feeling that threatened to tear out her soul and further shatter her already broken heart. There was an emptiness within her that she'd never experienced before. Not when her dad had died or her marriage had ended. She realised with a slight start that this feeling had nothing to do with losing Ruth. And as the funeral director, now standing up in front, said, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," and Alice was drawn along with everyone as they began shuffling forward in a line to accept a flower from the basket to toss onto the casket. A question arose in her. What is the point of having a life partner if I have to be here alone doing this? The question stayed, settling in her stomach like a stone, cold, hard, and uncomfortable. She accepted a pale pink carnation and tossed it in, her heart pounding. She sniffled and smiled through hugs and utterances with Ruth's husband, their 2 adult sons and 3 adult daughters, and moved on quickly to keep the queue moving. After milling about and exchanging greetings with dozens of people when the throng started to slowly disperse, Alice made her way over to her father's grave. She knew she'd get some time alone there. While Alice was sad and disappointed her dad, whom she'd loved so much, was gone, her mother and Olivia were downright angry about it, still 8 years on. They wouldn't be coming over to visit his grave. Oh, Dad, what am I going to do? My life's an absolute mess. She put her hand on the tombstone that had been warmed by the sun. She longed to sit on the granite edge, but knew if she did, she'd never want to move again. With a shock, she wondered if this hopelessness, this lost desperation, was anywhere near how her father had felt when he'd decided to end it all. No, she had options. She just had to figure them out. She couldn't give in to feeling sorry for herself. What hurt was that she was here with the people who were meant to matter the most to her, support her the most, unconditionally. And she couldn't talk to them about it without fear of being put down and ridiculed. Yep, so much for family being everything, she thought, recalling Brett's words from that day in the pub. Right then she felt more supported by a man who was dead and buried beneath 6 feet of dirt. That thought sank her lower than she thought possible. She looked up, sensing movement nearby. Time to go and put on a brave face at the wake, I suppose, she decided, and reluctantly turned to move away. But she stopped, startled to see her ex-husband standing a few steps away. "Hey, Rick," she said.
"Hey, Alice. How you doing?"
"Pretty shit, actually," she said.
"Yeah, understandable."
And then she was being drawn into a tight, lingering hug. The hug she'd been yearning for goodness knew how long, from David. She sank into him, breathed in his scent that after so many years still smelt familiar and comforting. As she felt herself relax for the first time that day, probably the first time in weeks, she also felt the dam holding back her tears break. She sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry," she said, when she'd finally managed to pull herself together enough to ease out of his grasp. "You're all wet now," she said, wiping at the big wet patch on his pale blue shirt.
"It's okay, Alice. Really. We've swapped more bodily fluids than that over the years."
Alice shook her head and gave his chest a gentle thump, but she smiled too. And she was so grateful for him at least attempting to lighten the mood. So grateful for him being there, full stop. "I'd better find Frank, Mum and Olivia," Alice said, looking around.
"It's good you could make it,"
Rick said, as they started to stroll slowly back towards the gate where people were streaming out and making their way to their cars. A few others were dotted about the small cemetery, paying their respects to loved ones they'd lost as they went.
"Yeah. A hard trip to make, huh? Hang on, where's your bloke? What's his name?"
"David. He couldn't make it."
"Can't believe he'd let you come on your own for the funeral of one of your best friends,"
Rick said. "So how come you're here? You weren't really close to Ruth's family other than through me, were you?" Alice said, desperate to move the conversation away from her and David before she accidentally confided in Rick. That wouldn't be good for anyone.
"No, Alice, I came for you. Funerals are also about paying respect to those who've lost, not just those who've gone. And I know your mum can be, well,
mean?" Alice offered quietly.
"Yeah, that'd be it if we're using understatements. It might not have worked out for us. I might have been a shit husband, but Alice, I'll always care about you."
"Thanks, Rick, that's lovely." but don't be too hard on yourself.
I've actually been going to counselling,
he said quietly, the most embarrassed and uncomfortable Alice had ever seen him.
I'm learning to love myself. God, doesn't that make me sound like a complete wanker?
Not at all. I'm glad you're getting help. That was what had been the problem with them. Rick didn't know how to love someone else properly because he didn't love himself enough. She'd wanted to help him, fix him, give him the love he felt was missing from his own family, while clinging to him as a crutch for her grief and her own need to be loved after losing her dad. By the time she realised just how damaged he was, they were married and it was too late. If only they'd just stayed friends and she hadn't ignored all the signs.
Please don't tell anyone about the counselling, he said. You know what this place is like.
Yep, I sure do. Alice thought of the rumours that she'd run away from when she'd left to go to Adelaide and then Melbourne.
I really am sorry, Alice, for everything. The way I treated you.
Thanks, Rick, but it wasn't just you. And it's all water under the bridge now.
We were too young and did it for the wrong reasons.
Alice turned and looked at him, frowning slightly as she marvelled at how he was the same, yet also seemed so very different. Rick, I'll always be grateful to you for trying to ease my pain over losing Dad, and trying to rescue me from my mother, she thought. But Alice couldn't bring herself to say these words aloud. She also couldn't say that she'd discovered the truth, that she didn't know how to love either, because she hadn't been shown unconditional love by her cold mother, and was predisposed to try to make it work with the wrong men.
God, don't think I'm trying to crack on to you or anything. I'm not.
I know. I heard you're seeing someone. Have a lady friend, Olivia said.
Not anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. I really am. I care about you too, Rick. I do. I want you to be happy.
Thanks. So things have worked out for you. Rich bloke, uni degree, big new house, I hear, and a new job.
Yep, all those things, Alice said without enthusiasm. You know your secret about having counselling?
Yeah,
Rick said dubiously. Well, I'll keep your secret if you'll keep mine.
Sure.
I quit my new job and I'm too scared to tell Mum.
Why?
Why did I quit, or why can't I tell Mum?
Both. And/or,
he said with a shrug.
I'm listening. I'm sensing you need to tell someone.
I lasted 4 weeks.
Oh, I'm sure you had your reasons.
Mum'll gloat about what a failure I am and how my fancy education hasn't got me anywhere, blah, blah, blah.
You're probably going to have to tell her, you know, sometime.
I was hoping to find another job before I did, Alice said, looking down and shifting the dirt with her feet. Christ, my life's an absolute mess. David thinks I'm a failure too.
Oh, come on. I'm sure that's not the case.
It was a really good job, well, on paper, in real estate.
Real estate?
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Alice, you're too nice for selling real estate. Isn't it cutthroat, all about money and sales, especially in a place like Melbourne?
Why can everyone see this and not me, Alice thought. I wanted to help people, she said.
Oh, Alice.
And Alice was slightly taken aback to hear him actually laugh. She glared at him.
Sorry, but that's funny. Real estate helping people? I don't think so.
Thanks a lot, Alice said, miffed but smiled despite herself. Yeah, well, live and learn.
So what went wrong? Why did you leave?
My boss was mean. A real bitch, which I probably could have handled if she didn't completely mess with my head as well.
She sounds lovely. Was she a bully?
Yeah, that too. Alice didn't want to go too far into it. Well, good on you for having the guts to leave, I say. Thanks, Rick. That means a lot. As I said, David is less than impressed with me. But you wouldn't have left without giving it a damned good shot. I know you, Alice. You give things a decent crack. I know 4 weeks doesn't sound long, but I was miserable. I tried, but in just that short a time, she managed to make me completely question who I was with her mental games. Jesus, sounds like a psycho. So why would David want you staying in a job like that? Mortgage, money, you know, the usual? No, I don't. No job is worth losing your mind over or being truly unhappy. Money isn't everything. It's nice to have, but it's not everything. I've learnt that. I reckon health's more important, he said sagely. If David loved you, he wouldn't... Shit, sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I'll butt out. You're right, though, Alice said sadly. You were seriously cruel to me at times, but here you are being so sensitive and kind. Who would have thought? It'll work out. You'll see, Rick said, putting an arm around Alice and giving her a squeeze. I hope so. We'd better get going before they send out a search party, he said. Yeah, you're probably right. Though the last thing Alice wanted was to leave this little sanctuary she'd found. Do you think we could be friends, Alice, and kind of stay in touch a bit? Rick asked as they walked. Not talking on the phone and stuff, but like on Facebook. I don't see why not. They continued in silence until they got to the gate where Frank, her mum, and Olivia were waiting. The approving look on her mother's face told her she was practically starting to prepare the guest list for Rick and Alice's second wedding, as if it would somehow erase the shame and embarrassment of the first one imploding. No way, Mum. It's never going to happen. Isn't it nice of Alice to grace us with her presence, all the way from Melbourne? Dawn said in her nasty sing-song voice. And there was the sneer that Alice now knew was practically a trademark of the narcissist. Yes, it's great to see her, Rick said. Did Alice tell you about her new job? In real estate, Dawn said with some evident pride. And any calmness Alice had achieved suddenly evaporated. She felt the blood draining from her face, her insides freeze, the bile rise. She did, Rick said. And about her uni course? She's done so well to get a degree. That's a great achievement in itself. You should be very proud. Alice's heart surged towards him, and she wished she could have said thanks or offered him a grateful smile without anyone noticing. Well, come on, we'll miss the wake at the rate we're going, Dawn said. Alice suddenly really didn't want to go. She'd finally got her tears to stop, and she was feeling anxious about all the lies she was telling. No doubt her mother had told the whole district about her new job in real estate, and she would be asked about it by at least 100 people. Oh, God. Right then, she almost blurted, Mum, I've quit my job. There, get your lecture over with. Or maybe she'd say that as she left to walk across the tarmac at the airport tomorrow. She'd be out of contact for the next few hours while Dawn processed it. Rick, come to dinner tonight, Alice's mother said suddenly. Unless you have other plans. He looked stricken, like a rabbit caught in the middle of the road in the headlights. Alice was about to save him by saying he was seeing someone, but stopped herself. He's a big boy. Anyway, it would be good to have him as a distraction. Take the headlights off her. Alice is heading back tomorrow. Of course she came for Ruth and not to see us, Dawn said huffily. Oh, my God. Did you just say that? You're competing with a dead woman for my attention. You can't be serious. She shot Rick a stricken look. I'd love to come, Dawn, he said, offering Alice's mother a dazzling smile. So, Alice, you may as well drive to the wake with me then. Right then, Alice could have kissed him. She couldn't bear the thought of getting into the car with them. Dinner would be bad enough. Well, you could have said, Olivia said, and stomped off. Yes, Alice, we've been waiting here for you, her mother said.
It's fine, Alice, we'll see you there, Frank said. Dawn, darling, we wouldn't have got out of here yet with all the cars anyway.
As she walked with Rick to his car, taking a little satisfaction in seeing the stunned expressions of people around her, Alice thought she would be forever grateful to him for being here for her today. Chapter 23.
I'm over this way,
Rick said, nodding his head to the right. Alice had to hurry to keep up with his long stride, regretting not for the first time wearing heels. They weren't high, but probably anything might have felt high and uncomfortable today, anything beyond slippers. Thanks so much for this, Alice said. I would have thought spending less time with Mum and co would make me more tolerant, but oh no. The longer and further away I am, the more I'm realising how toxic they are and how much I really don't like them. Not Frank, he's lovely, though I don't know how he copes. Sorry to go on.
Your mum sure was being a bit full on. Maybe it's her response to the funeral.
Maybe. But she doesn't seem at all upset about Ruth. Stoic through and through. She's barely even mentioned her name.
Weren't they best friends once?
Yep. Hey, thanks for agreeing to tonight, too.
I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do or not. Tongues will start wagging.
Like I care. Let them. It won't be any worse than when we split up.
No.
Anyway, wait until they see us turn up at the wake and then leave together. There'll be an uproar. God, I both love and loathe this place, Alice said wearily.
You don't come back very often these days, do you?
Nope. Only when necessary. Weddings, funerals, Christmas. Seriously, Mum does my head in. And it's getting worse now I'm away from it, and it's all becoming so much clearer. As I said, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, she added with a tight laugh.
Today wouldn't be so bad if your bloke could have come too.
Then he could have endured the Inquisition as well.
I never realised how bad your mum was. I'm sorry. I'm sure there were lots of times I didn't support you enough on that score,
he said, turning and looking at her before getting into the car.
There certainly were.
Yeah, but I understand. She's very good at subtle manipulation, bullying by stealth so no one realises. I'm only just seeing a lot of it myself. Anyway, you've got to stop apologising. It's all in the past. I'm so exhausted I'm not going to want to get out of this car ever again, she said, getting in and trying to ignore the weird sensation that this had been their car, and this had often been her seat before so much had changed. It even smelt the same as it used to. How was that possible after more than 4 years? It was quite unsettling to be sitting beside him, but still it was better than being badgered by her sister or mother, or enduring their silent icy treatment that came and went without warning or any logical reason. I might have come back more often if there was a way I could sneak into town and out again without having to see them, Alice said. But Ruth's gone now.
Wow. Really? You feel that strongly?
He looked as shocked as she had been when Brett had mentioned he was estranged from his family. Yep. Sounds awful, huh? I'm just really beginning to see the damage they've done to me, and I guess I'm scared of being pulled back into that toxic world again. I think I'm the one who owes you an apology on that front.
Huh?
I was a bully and bossy and picked on you too, just like you said when we were splitting up. I can see that now. I'm really sorry, Rick.
As you've said, it's all in the past. A lot of not very nice things were said by both of us. I think we're even on that score. Hey, if you ever do want to sneak into town, you'd always be welcome to stay at the house.
Thanks, but I think that would be taking us being friends a little too far, not to mention weird and creepy.
I guess offering to pick you up from the plane would be a bit OTT too, huh?
Yes. As much as I'd love to avoid my mother and sister, it's probably easier to just go along with it. You'd think moving to Melbourne would be far enough away, she said heavily.
Oh, I think Dawn would manage to infiltrate your life and try to tell you how to run it no matter where you were. You wouldn't even be safe in Siberia, I reckon." "No, you're probably right," Alice said with a laugh. She liked feeling that Rick understood her, had her back, could see the truth, even if he was probably humouring her, trying too hard. If she put aside all the pain he'd caused her, she might relax even more. But her tiredness was keeping her on edge, which was probably a good thing. That and all she'd been through with Carmel. Alice felt as if she couldn't trust anyone these days except Lauren. Okay, she could trust David, but he just didn't seem to understand her. He was good to her, wasn't he? Everything would be better when she got back and life returned to normal. Whatever normal was, really. Right now, she had to concentrate on keeping it together through the wake and then trying not to snap at her mother or sister over dinner. After that, she could go to sleep, and then there was only breakfast and the trip back to the airport to deal with. It didn't sound like much, but Alice felt as if she were embarking on a mountain climb or some other extreme endurance event. "Well, I'll leave you to mingle and catch you later," Rick said as they entered the local golf club. "I'm going to get a beer." "Okay," Alice said. "Alice, it's so good of you to come," Ruth's husband Thomas said, gathering her to him. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Thomas," she said with a gulp as her tears started again. "Thank you. It means so much that you're here," he said, holding her by the shoulders and looking into her face. "Ruth thought of you as another daughter, as well as a dear friend. We both do. Oh, okay, yes. Sorry, Alice, I'd better keep moving," he said as someone touched his arm to get his attention. "Thanks again for coming all this way, Alice. It means a lot," he said. And then he was gone. Alice was left standing there, wondering if she could somehow escape now. Suddenly she felt the presence of someone close beside her, and her arm was gripped firmly. "Come on, Alice," her mother said, tugging at her. Alice spent the next, she wasn't sure how long, being dragged around, paraded around really, by her mother from person to person, and introduced as if she didn't know this woman or that man, despite having known them all her life. Practically the whole district had been at her 18th, 21st, engagement and wedding celebrations. If she didn't know better, she might suspect her mother was suffering memory problems. Thankfully, Dawn didn't give her daughter any opportunity to speak or answer questions for herself, and Alice managed to keep all her lies intact. A few times she cringed at her mother replying, "Well, of course someone has to die for her to actually come home," in response to someone saying how nice it was that Alice had made the trip. She wondered if anyone else noticed the barbs Dawn tossed about at her expense, or the hypocrisy that on the one hand Alice's mother seemed thrilled to have her daughter here to parade around proudly, yet at the same time was telling her off and putting her down. Why did everyone think her mother was oh so lovely? Alice wished she could find a witty, sarcastic retort to throw into the mix, but even if she could think that quickly on her feet, she wouldn't want to lower herself to her mother's level and give her more ammunition. Deep down, Alice knew she'd never win when it came to her mother. Damned if she did, damned if she didn't. She tried not to wonder if she'd treated Rick like this. Oh well, it didn't matter now. "Right, ready to go," Rick said, appearing beside her. Speak of the devil. "Yes, that would be good, thanks." Alice thought she'd managed to get around to most people she'd wanted to see. As she followed Rick out to the car, she released a long sigh of relief. She was halfway through this ordeal. Just dinner, breakfast, and the trip to the plane to get through. Right at that moment, Alice thought it might almost be worth the gossip to stay at Rick's place rather than with her mother, and nearly laughed aloud at the sad thought of Rick being preferable to her immediate family. The truth hurts, she concluded sadly, and settled into the passenger seat. They arrived at the family shop where Dawn and Frank lived on the top floor, moments before Frank and Olivia's cars pulled up. "Don't worry, I'll carry your bag, Alice," Olivia said pointedly, holding up Alice's carry-on case. "Thanks, Liv," Alice said, refusing to take the bait. She'd actually completely forgotten about it.
Olivia, you do the greens. Alice, you set the table, Dawn said. Frank, sort out the drinks. Rick, go and see if Trevor needs a hand closing up. Alice and Rick shared a knowing look, but both were wise enough to remain silent and do as they were told. As Alice took out the cutlery, she marvelled at how amazing it was that while her life had completely changed, she'd changed so much in the last few years, for the better until recent events. Everything here and with her family apparently hadn't. Oh, except the placemats, she suddenly realised as her mother cried out. Come on, not those, the blue ones. Next drawer across. While Alice wanted to defend herself and point out that she didn't actually live here anymore, so shouldn't be expected to know these things, she didn't want to provide another opportunity for her mother to deride her for not visiting more often. Finally, they were all seated around the table, including Olivia's husband, Trevor, who Alice had never particularly liked, but had never managed to put her finger on quite why. Most likely he was too much like Olivia and their mother, and simply pushed all her hot buttons too. Or perhaps it was because he was a weak yes-man and she couldn't muster enough respect for him because of it. Frank was too, and it bothered Alice, but Trevor was missing the gentle kindness that Frank possessed. She cringed when Trevor said, "Nice to see you, Alice," in the same derisive, drawling voice that her mother and Olivia used. And there it is. Case in point, she thought, sipping her wine. The last thing Alice felt like was alcohol, but she didn't want to prompt the question of whether she was pregnant, which would then see her mother making comments about marriage and David's lack of commitment, blah, blah, blah. They were big drinkers, so anyone abstaining caused a ruckus. She'd have to keep her wits about her. While it might be nice to block out the evening with an alcohol haze, potentially letting her guard down was the problem, and the last thing she needed was a hangover. Alice looked at her plate, wondering what they were about to eat. Thankfully, her mother suddenly proudly declared, "Chili con carne, eat up." She now remembered how unappetizing her mother's meals had been when she was growing up. Dawn had always been on some health kick or other, eliminating this or that, overdosing them on something else. That was one of the things Alice had loved about spending time with Ruth and her family, she thought sadly. Ruth hadn't cooked and made no apology for it. Often when it was dinner time, they'd all trot off to the Roadhouse, the only takeaway place in town, for a quarter chicken, chips, peas and gravy hot pack, an absolute no-no in Alice's house. The Stanley kids were occasionally also allowed the wonderful sugary cereal that Alice had craved. One of her favourite memories was going to Ruth's place and watching PG movies without parental supervision when they'd been 13, clutching small bowls of dry Fruit Loops and Cocoa Pops to munch on. She knew it wasn't the differences in food that she had loved so much, but the calm, gentle, easygoing atmosphere that permeated the whole Stanley house, a far cry from the tension and shouting within the Hamiltons' walls. "So, while we're all here, it's a good time to discuss what we're doing for Christmas," Dawn said, when there was a pause in the conversation halfway through the meal. Out of the corner of her eye, Alice noticed Rick shift on his chair, as if trying to disappear or at least distance himself. How inappropriate, Mum, and how awkward can you make things? "Alice?" Dawn prompted. "Oh, David and I haven't discussed it yet," she lied, hoping those around the table would attribute the extra colour in her cheeks to the glass of red wine she'd consumed. "Good, that's settled then. We'll have it here," Dawn said. "Well, actually, we might be going away," Alice said quickly, knowing it was easier to pave the way now than trying to back out later. "I thought you said you haven't discussed it yet. What is it, Alice? You have or you haven't discussed it?" her mother demanded. Oh, God. Well, dear, it's months away," Frank said, putting a hand on his wife's arm. Thank God for Frank, Alice thought. "Christmas is a time for family, Alice. Where are you thinking of going? Perhaps we can all go," Dawn said. Jesus, no. "Rick, you're having Christmas with your family, aren't you?"
You know, Dawn, I might just go somewhere else this year too. I haven't really thought about it. Oh, well, I wouldn't mind going to Melbourne. Alice and David have got plenty of space now. It'd be a cheap trip, Trevor said.
Alice had to bite her lip to stop herself from telling him to shut up.
"Let's table the discussion for another day," Frank said wearily. "Who's for a refill?"
he added, holding up the bottle of wine. Alice held up her glass as much for a distraction as want of more wine. "Bless you, Frank. But if you're aware enough to intervene, how is it you're still here at all? That is the question." Suddenly Rick pushed his chair back.
"Thanks for dinner, Dawn, Frank. I'd better be going. See you all," he said with a wave. "Have a safe trip back, Alice."
"Thanks. And thanks for today," she said. Taking that as a sign dinner was over, she stood up and started clearing the table when Frank said,
"You go to bed, love. You've had a long day of travelling. We'll look after the washing up."
Alice thought she heard her mother scoff, but hoped she'd been mistaken. "Yes, all right, go," her mother said with clear exasperation, most likely at Frank for intervening and taking away some of her control. This is the end of CD 5. The book continues on CD 6. CD 6. Chapter 24. Alice stepped into the shower and let the tears flow freely. She felt racked with grief over Ruth, a yearning for the unconditional love and affection of Bill and the steadfastness and predictability of David, and sadness at how little love there was for her here. And then the jagged edge of self-pity and anger stabbed at her. Why would I expect it to get any better, be any different? Why do I keep seeking approval and love when I know I will never get it? How was it that as a well-educated 30-year-old woman, she could feel like an angst-ridden child of around 10 all over again, just with one icy glare, one cutting remark, one sneering, crooked smile from her mother? That was the age she had been when she first noticed how cold and distant her mother was, and when Alice had made her first conscious efforts to get her mother to notice her, praise her, love her. Now, after having read the articles about narcissism, Alice knew the truth, that she'd never had warmth and love from her mother. So why the hell do I still try so hard? Why do I even come back here? Well, of course, this trip was different. Would she one day have the guts to completely cut them off, like Brett apparently had his family? She went to bed, ignored David's phone message, and sent him a text instead. She'd call him in the morning when perhaps she'd feel less exhausted. Despite her wretched tiredness, Alice tossed and turned, unable to slip into sleep. Eventually she must have, though, because she woke with a start to the sound of her phone's alarm going off. She had a quick shower and got ready before her mother could tell her she was running late. Then she took her bag out to the front door and placed her handbag on top. In the kitchen, Frank was at the stove, a pan sizzling in front of him. "It's just us. Your mum and Olivia have gone walking," he said. "Did you sleep okay?" "No, not really," Alice said, after letting out a long sigh of relief. She liked that she could be honest with Frank and not receive an interrogation or any criticism. "Completely understandable. With another big day of travelling ahead, I thought you might like a decent breakfast. Shh, our little secret," he added with a warm smile. "Thanks, Frank, that's lovely of you." She didn't have the heart to tell him just the smell of the bacon was making her feel queasy. "I don't care what your mother says. Sometimes one needs a hearty dose of carbs and animal fat," Frank said kindly, placing a plate laden with fried food in front of Alice. "Coffee?" Her appetite returned instantly and her mouth began to water. "Yes, please. This looks great. I really appreciate it." "It's my pleasure. And of course you can't eat alone, so thanks for being my excuse to indulge." "I suppose I'll be in trouble for not getting up early enough to go for a walk with them." Don't worry about that. Right now you need to take care of yourself. Deal with your grief any way you see fit." Alice smiled at him, and she longed to lay her head on his shoulder and sob. I really miss her, even though... Oh, Frank, I feel so bad that we weren't in touch much lately. Ruth knew you had your life to get on with. You can't be beating yourself up. I'm sure she was happy to know you didn't need her quite so much. Don't worry, we've got plenty of time, Frank said, clearly noticing Alice anxiously checking her watch. I'm taking you and we'll leave nice and early, as soon as we've had breakfast and cleaned up the evidence. Alice let out another sigh, relieved that she wouldn't have to share the car with her mum or sister, as well as knowing that she'd make the plane in time. For some reason, her mother, and Olivia was the same, despite all her hurrying up and cajoling of everyone else, seemed to have no concept of time. She was always a few minutes late or took things right to the wire. Getting to school had always been stressful for Alice, and all too often she would find herself sitting in the car minutes after they should have left, honking the horn. Back then it seemed like her mother's annoying habit. Now, since she'd read about the traits of narcissism, Alice could see it was both a deliberate way for her mother to cause drama and draw attention to herself, and a demonstration of a rules-don't-apply-to-me attitude. As they washed and dried the dishes side by side, Alice wondered how Dawn treated Frank behind closed doors. Hopefully better than in public. Otherwise she'd lose all respect for him for allowing himself to be downtrodden and bullied. Perhaps Alice was just overly sensitive and intolerant, as her mother had so often told her. "Righto, let's get on the road," Frank said, wiping his hands and hanging up the tea towel. Alice felt a little guilty at being relieved she wouldn't have an encounter with her mother or sister to ruin her morning, which had been better than expected so far. But 2 streets from the house, there they were, power walking towards the car, their hips swinging at the same angles and rate. Alice almost giggled at wondering who was trying to outdo whom. She imagined them walking faster and faster, each trying to keep in front but not make the competition obvious by breaking into a run. God, it was too much, Alice thought, shaking her head. They were so bloody alike. Thank Christ I got out of this place, and that I'm more like Dad, bless him. "Good morning, ladies," Frank said as he brought the car to a halt in the middle of the road. "A walk would have been good for you, Alice," her mother said, resting her hands on the passenger window. "Fresh country air." "Yeah, it would have been fun to have you along," Olivia said. "So you could try and beat me too. No thanks." Alice smiled to herself at remembering their last walk together. It was so much easier to get up and go with them than endure the jibes about her laziness for the rest of the day. "I'm on holidays I'm allowed to sleep in" didn't wash with them. Having made a half-hearted effort to keep up but given up, Alice had deliberately lagged behind and walked at a more enjoyable pace. She wasn't unfit, just didn't want to play their silly game. "Well, have a safe trip back," Dawn said. Both she and Olivia were now stepping up and down on the spot, looking as ridiculous as someone in a 1980s or 90s exercise class. All they were missing was a fluoro-pink dumbbell in each hand and matching leg warmers. "We'd better keep moving before we catch a chill." "Yes, we don't want to cramp up. Bon voyage," Olivia said. Alice almost laughed out loud. "You're not bloody elite athletes. You've been for an hour's walk." Oh, too funny. "Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your walk," Alice said. Olivia strode off with a wave. "Perhaps next time, Alice, you might actually come and visit us, and stay for longer than 24 hours, her mother said. "Okay, then we'd better get cracking. See you later," Frank said. "Thanks a bloody lot. And why do you think I don't bother? How could someone be so stupid as to not see that such comments just drove people away or kept them away? Not stupidity, Alice corrected herself. It was self-centeredness. It was quite sad, really, when you looked at it through analytical, enlightened eyes. Of course, she still felt wounded, but it helped Alice to know so much more about the psychology behind these people. "She doesn't mean to upset you, Alice," Frank said as they drove off. "Oh, yes, she does. It's textbook narcissism from what I've read." She longed to fill Frank in on what she'd learnt, but didn't want to hurt him. God only knew why, but this was the woman he loved and had chosen to spend his later years of life with. "I know," she lied, in an effort to mollify him.
"Is everything okay, Alice?"
Frank asked, after they'd been driving in silence for a while.
"Other than the obvious, I mean. Losing Ruth and tiredness from travelling."
"I'm fine, Frank." She could tell him the truth, but she didn't think he was the sort of man to keep secrets from his wife. A greasy breakfast now and then hardly counted, and she couldn't very well ask him to. That wouldn't be fair. Alice was relieved when the ping of a message sounded on her phone and she was able to concentrate on that. It was from David. "Sorry, probably won't be able to make it to the airport. You'll have to catch a cab." Alice let out a sigh and tucked the phone back into her handbag.
"Bad news?"
Frank asked. "Not really. Just David saying he probably can't pick me up from the airport."
"Oh, that is disappointing."
"But not at all surprising. Work. It's always work."
"Is everything okay with you? You and David, that is?"
"Yeah, we're fine." The silence stretched on until Frank said,
"Oh, I love this song. Do you mind if I turn it up?"
"Sure." Alice was a little puzzled. She hadn't even realised the radio was on, it was turned so low. She was even more intrigued to hear ABBA filling the car, and then Frank was singing along. A few moments later he stopped.
"Sorry, can't help myself. I'm a huge ABBA fan from way back,"
he said, blushing a little and shrugging his shoulders. "Hey, don't mind me. Carry on," Alice said.
"Only if you join in."
And she did. By the time they pulled into the car park at the airport an hour later, Alice's chest was aching, not from the pain inside her, but from singing a string of songs that had come on that she and Frank knew the words to. She felt so much better than she had in weeks.
"Thanks for that. Alice, your mum doesn't indulge me. She hates me singing."
"I don't know why, Frank. You're very good."
"Thanks, Alice. I had dreams of being on Broadway once," he said shyly.
"Oh, you dark horse. Well, I think you would have been great." She was about to ask him more, but as they got out of the car, the moment was lost. Frank took her bag out of the boot, and as he walked her to the terminal, he put his arm around her, his kindness causing all of Alice's painful emotions to come flooding back. They each bought a newspaper and sat in silence, flicking through them, as if embarrassed by their earlier shenanigans or not wanting anything to change the happier mood, though for Alice it had already subsided. She hated goodbyes. It was strange, but while she loathed the way her mother treated her and no longer felt much of a direct emotional connection to the town she'd once lived in, she always felt a certain sadness when she left after a visit. She didn't know why. Perhaps it was because her mother, yet again, hadn't treated her as she'd hoped, or that such a beautiful little town held so much pain for her. According to most films and folklore, small towns were generally supposed to be wonderful places full of generous people. But Alice knew only too well the toxicity hidden within Hope Springs' neat streets and carefully tended gardens. Just like her own family, really. Did everyone and everything put on a fake facade? "Frank," she said quietly, almost hoping he wouldn't hear her. He said, head down, still reading his paper. "I lasted 4 weeks in my real estate job. The woman I worked for was horrible and I hated it, so I quit. I was too scared to tell Mum." Her voice was almost that of a little girl. He looked up, returned a gentle smile, and put an arm around her.
"I'm sorry you had an awful experience, Alice, and there's no shame in changing your mind for whatever reason. But I do understand why you felt you couldn't tell your mother," he said, giving her shoulder a squeeze before removing his arm. "Would you like me to tell her, or would you like me to keep it a secret?"
"Could you tell her, please?"
"If that's what you want."
Alice bit her lip and nodded.
"Okay, then."
"Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate it."
"You're welcome, Alice," he said,
and returned to reading his newspaper. When she hugged Frank just before heading out to her plane, she didn't want to let go. She felt the urge to tell him her woes about David and their relationship, even ask his advice. But it was too late now anyway, and confiding in him might put Frank in a difficult position.
"It's been really lovely to see you, Alice. Travel safe," he said, giving her a quick peck.
And then, putting a hand gently to her cheek, he said,
"Sweetheart, everything always works out for the best eventually, you'll see. Just be strong and kind to yourself."
"Thanks, Frank, I will," she said, choking on the words before turning and walking out the door. Tears began to fall as she made her way across the tarmac with the other passengers. Thankfully, no one asked her what was wrong or if she needed a tissue, and she was able to settle into her seat and snuggle up to the side of the plane. She looked out the small plastic window up to the sky. Big black clouds were forming. "Oh, Ruth," she thought. Suddenly, a beam of bright sunshine shot through a gap between the clouds, causing Alice to almost completely lose what was left of her composure. Goodbye. Chapter 25. Alice looked around when she heard her name called. Her heart leapt at seeing David standing there waving. She rushed over and hugged him. Suddenly, everything felt so much better.
"Phew, I thought I wasn't going to make it,"
he said, a little breathlessly as he took her carry-on bag in one hand and clasped Alice's hand in the other. The heaviness within her shifted slightly and became a duller ache than the sharp pain that had been plaguing her for the past few days. But her heart sank again and then knotted as David began to speak, almost as quickly as he walked. Alice struggled to keep up.
"So, how was it?"
"Have you forgotten the reason for my trip?" "Pretty horrible?"
"Oh, yeah, of course. But at least you had your family around you."
"I guess." There was never going to be much more discussion about her family. Alice knew David found them unsophisticated and not at all interesting. How fascinating was the current wholesale price of potatoes, or the thrill of achieving a significant discount with a notoriously tight-fisted supplier when you mixed with the likes of those David mixed with. It was all a little quaint to him, Alice thought. She loved David's family, but didn't have anything in common with them either. His parents were both public servants in Sydney. "How's Bill?"
"He's good."
"Have you been walking him?"
"Of course I've been walking him, Alice. I can take care of a dog, you know. And you did leave very detailed instructions."
"I just thought you might have been too busy with work. Sorry. I didn't mean to criticize you. I'm tired." They made their way across the walkway to the car park and David paid for the parking.
"So, did you see lots of people you know?" he asked.
"Yes. I think Ruth would have been pleased that so many turned out. And the sun was shining, so that was nice." Alice had to give him points for trying. It wasn't David's fault he didn't know anything about grief, that he'd never lost anyone, didn't know what it felt like. How nice to still be in that position at his age. Alice thought she'd probably been through more in her relatively short life so far than a lot of other people, though when she thought about her journey it was more with a sense of wonder than self-pity. When it came to her father's death, she never allowed herself to think, why me, because Alice felt that would bring it back to her. She didn't believe his suicide was about her at all. He'd believed his life was intolerable and he'd decided to do something about it. That was his decision and his decision alone. Alice's mother might choose to make it about her, of course the effect and not the cause, but Alice wouldn't diminish her dad in that way. She shuddered at wondering if Frank would get to that point someday too. But no, he didn't appear to be as deep a thinker as Alice's father had been, no doubt where she got it from, and he seemed to let things wash right on over. Although no one had realized where her dad's head had been at until his deed was done. Oh well. Frank knew her number if he ever needed to talk.
"I've got us some chicken schnitzels for dinner, and I'm going to do oven chips and homemade coleslaw. How does that sound?"
David said as he unlocked the car and put her bag in the boot. "Perfect. Just what I need. Thank you," Alice said, her aching heart swelling a little.
"You can have a bath while I cook if you like. Then how about an early night?"
he said, once they were in the car. He patted her leg and then left his hand there. Alice looked at his hand. She knew what he was angling towards. Sex. And it was the last thing she felt like. The thought sent her to a whole new level of weariness. But she'd better pull herself together and participate if she wasn't to lose him, them, altogether.
"Any news on the job front?"
he asked as he carefully drove out of the car park. "David, I've only been gone 2 days.
"Well, how do I know if you've had any emails or not? You've got applications out there, haven't you?"
"Can you please stop nagging me? I'm doing my best." They drove in tense silence, and Alice stared out the window to avoid looking at him and feeling even worse for appearing so unappreciative of him coming out to pick her up. The trip to the airport and back home was not inconsequential, and it saved her a taxi fare of around $80 to $90, she estimated. Looking at the passing scenery, Alice marvelled at how built up the area around the airport had become in the years since she'd moved to Melbourne. So much farming land had been swallowed up by big warehouses and semi-industrial developments, housing and shopping centres. What would it be like in 20 years? Where would she be? It was both a scary and comforting question, Alice thought. On the one hand, she had practically her whole life ahead of her, but on the other, she didn't want to waste it. What if 10 years from now she was still looking for the perfect job? "Don't be silly," she heard a voice in her head say. "You'll be the mother of David's children by then." But would she? She turned to look at him, and somehow saw a flash of what their life might be like in the years ahead. She was at home with a couple of kids, trying to get them fed and bathed while tearing her hair out because, of course, David was hardly ever there to help. He was off travelling or working late at the office. She frowned and chewed on her bottom lip in concentration. "What?" David said, catching Alice staring at him. "Are we ever going to get married, David?"
"What?"
"Are we ever going to get married?"
"What would be the point?"
"Seriously?" How about as a sign of commitment?"
"I don't think you can get much more committed than living together, Alice. Where's this coming from?"
"So you really don't believe in marriage, is that what you're saying?"
"Alice, you know my views. We've discussed it before."
"But I thought—"
"What, that I'd changed my mind?"
Alice burnt with shame. That was exactly what she'd thought. If she were being honest, she'd say she had wondered last time if he'd just used the first excuse that had come to him in order to deflect from the subject. She knew he wanted kids in the next 5 years. Marriage was closely related to that topic, wasn't it? It was for her.
"So, to reiterate, no, I really don't believe in marriage."
"Why not?"
"Why do you believe in it? I would have thought with your track record you'd have been sufficiently cured, having a failed marriage, that is."
How bloody patronising, but sadly true. Alice coloured under his rebuke. "I told you," she said. "Commitment, love. Do you love me, David?"
"Of course I do. Where is all this coming from, Alice? I wouldn't have thought your mother would have been encouraging you to take another walk down the aisle."
"But why don't you believe in marriage, David? I want to know," Alice persisted, despite knowing full well she was sailing very close to the edge of his level of tolerance.
"I've told you often enough I'm an atheist. Organised religion is a load of shit. Marriage is tied up in religion. End of story."
"It doesn't have to be. We could have a civil service, say in a park or something."
"Alice, I don't see why I need to further prove my commitment to you. We live together, share the same bed and the bills. Frankly, it's a bit offensive having my commitment under question. Look where you were when we met. You're overthinking it. What you need is to get a job to sink your teeth into and stop you being so damned insecure. You're unsettled because of your friend's funeral. You need to just calm down."
Alice wanted to slap him. It was lucky he was driving and she wasn't ready to die, or she might just have done so. He took his hand off her leg and placed it on the steering wheel and concentrated on the road ahead. "Well, I don't want to have kids without being married," she said, folding her arms tightly across her chest.
"So now you're going to hold that over me as some sort of blackmail? Seriously, Alice?"
He shook his head, which infuriated her even more.
"I don't see why marriage is so important to you."
"And I don't see why it's not to you, so we have a problem."
"Why are you making so much out of it?"
"Because I've just been halfway across the country to a funeral on my own and I'm really upset and you don't seem to care." Tears filled her eyes.
Of course I care, Alice. Stop being so melodramatic, he said with a sigh. Not enough to go with me. Come on, Alice, I couldn't. You know that. I hate that you care more about your job, your fucking project, than you do about me. Money isn't everything, David. Alice, don't raise your voice to me. I know, you've said it often enough. We're adults. We'll discuss it civilly like adults, she said, mimicking him. Well, you don't seem to be hearing me. I'm telling you, David, it's not working. Fine, rant and rave like a child throwing a tantrum if you want, if you think it will help. All I want is your support, your love, your kindness, David, for you to actually show it, Alice said quietly, the tears streaming down her face. She felt defeated. What was the point? How can you say that? Who's the one paying all the bills now you don't have a job? Emotionally, David, she said with a deep sigh. And anyway, I'd like to see you live without money. They can all go on about how money doesn't buy you happiness, but try getting by without it. Maybe I will, Alice said in barely more than a whisper. Sorry, what? David, this isn't working. We are not working. How do you think you'll survive out in the big wide world without me propping you up? You can't be serious. Suddenly he seemed to deflate, lose his arrogant bravado. Don't be silly, Alice. You're just tired and upset. It's been a tough few months with moving house and the job and everything. Don't make rash decisions you'll regret. I'm serious, David. I love you, but I don't think we share the same fundamental values. What do you mean? We're both honest, kind, hard-working people. What other fundamental values are there? Alice stayed silent. She stared out of the window, her vision blurred from the wash of tears covering her eyes. The minutes ticked by. The only sound was the quiet hum of tyres on the dry asphalt beneath them. Can I ask you a favour? David asked quietly a few minutes later, his hand settling back on her leg gently. She looked at him. If you're serious about leaving me, and for the record, I don't want you to. I think we're good together and a good team. Please don't do it until the project is finished. The upheaval would put my whole career in jeopardy. Please, Alice, if you care about me at all... Okay, David, fine. I won't make any decisions until then. It was a half-hearted commitment. Alice was stuck on the fact that he still hadn't said the L word. Right now, all he probably had to do was profess his love for her and she'd be putty in his hands. They travelled on in silence, moving slowly in unusually heavy traffic, trapped in the car together in heavy tension. I didn't realise marriage meant that much to you, David said a bit later. Well, maybe it wouldn't if you showed your love and emotional commitment and support in other ways. She kept the words to herself. What was so obvious and important to her were things he would never comprehend. That was clear now. And she was so tired. She could barely muster the energy to utter another word. If it really means that much to you, I guess we could, he said. Alice looked at him. Is this you proposing, David? Oh, well, I guess. Seriously? No, not like this. But I want kids. I want you to have my kids. And if, he pleaded, you really just don't get it, do you? Any of it. I want you to want to marry me, David, and you don't. Let's just leave it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. She was no longer angry, but she felt as if her insides had been ripped out and she was completely empty. She was disappointed, in him but also in herself. How had she been so stupid to buy into the happily ever after love will conquer all, he'll change bullshit again? How had she spent more than 4 years with this person? At the house, they silently went inside, the mood between them a tense truce. Alice rushed in ahead to see Bill. She felt a few pieces of her soul glue back together at his cheerful greeting. I'll get started on dinner, David called as he made his way through to the kitchen. I'm going to take Bill for a quick walk, she said. Oh, well,
It's okay, I won't be long. 20 minutes tops. Alice picked Bill up and ran to the park, keen to release the excess energy and stretch her limbs after being cooped up in planes and trying to hold herself together in front of her mother and sister and now David, and then sat cross-legged on a bench holding the dog on her lap. It was quiet with not a soul around. With Bill held close, his heart beating against her own, she gave in to the sobbing she'd been desperately trying to hold in. After a few moments she heard footsteps and saw a jogger approaching. She wiped at her eyes and sniffed back the tears and tried to pull herself together. "Are you okay?" Alice looked up in surprise at seeing a slightly older woman in running gear standing in front of her with a concerned look on her face. "Yes, thanks. I'm just having a moment," Alice said. "I'm happy to stop and chat if it would help," the woman said. "Honestly, I'm fine, but I really appreciate you stopping and asking." "Okay, then. It's good for the soul to have a good cry, and physiologically, so let it out. All the best." "Thanks very much, and same to you." Alice sat and waited until there were no more tears to shed, and then with her whole body aching, she made her way home. She was almost back when she realised she'd left without her keys. She cursed her lapse as she rang the doorbell and stood there trying not to look as sheepish as she felt. David opened the door, and before she could get inside, he enveloped her in a hug. "Please don't be angry with me. I don't want us to fight," he said. Alice held David tight, using that as her answer while thinking, "I'm not angry. I'm sad." Chapter 26. "Hey, Lauren," Alice said, opening the door to her friend and embracing her. "Do you need coffee or would you like to go for a walk?" "I just had a coffee, thanks, and how could I say no to that face?" Lauren said, pointing to Bill, who was standing in the hallway behind Alice. "Tell me about it," Alice said. "He does pleading dog pose so well. Hang on, I'll just grab his lead and my phone and keys." "He's very good on the lead," Lauren said while they waited at the lights to cross the busy road. Either his previous owners, who I don't want to think about, or the RSPCA did all the hard work with obedience training. He's a dream all round. "So, how are you doing?" Lauren asked when they were at the park and had started walking along the path. "Did you tell your mum about checking in the job?" "No, I chickened out. I left that particular grenade with Frank, her husband. He told her, so now I'm dodging her calls." "Oh dear. How was the trip back there, other than the funeral, which I imagine was pretty horrendous?" "The funeral was sad, as you'd expect. I'm glad I went, though. You probably wouldn't have been able to if you hadn't quit." "Exactly, so that's one good thing to come out of it." "So did you know everyone? It's one of those types of places, isn't it?" "Yep. Oh, you'll never guess who turned up that I wasn't expecting to see." "Who?" "My ex-husband, Rick." "Oh, wow, awkward." "Actually, no, it wasn't at all." "Ooh, tell me more." "He was my saviour." "I think you'd better tell me everything." "Well," Alice started, and told Lauren everything. "And then Mum invited him for dinner. It was like we were right back there when we were married." "Jesus, that's some weird shit right there." "Yep, it sure is." "Doesn't she realise you're in a committed relationship, or doesn't she like David?" "I have no idea what goes through that woman's head. Seriously, reading all I have on narcissism and toxic families and the like, after Brett told us about his family, has put some things into perspective. I really don't like my family, Lauren. Except Frank. God only knows why he sticks around. And that's okay." "I know. In some ways I envy Brett his decision to cut ties with his." "Yes, but it's been hard for him. Really hard." Something in Lauren's wistful tone caught Alice's attention. "Hang on. Are you two an item?" she said, glancing at Lauren, who was blushing slightly and looking a little shy. "Yep." "Since when?" "We had a long, deep and meaningful on the phone after that lunch, and another over coffee, and then another. As you know, we've been mates for years, but I think him being so open and honest with his feelings flicked a switch in me. It's early days. We're taking it slow. He's still working through a lot of stuff, including the fact he's chosen the wrong partners in the past because of the whole narcissism thing." Have you kissed? Yup, Lauren said, dipping her head coyly. And? Lovely. Really lovely, Lauren said with a long, contented sigh. Just a bit of a snog, no more. As I said, he needs to feel his way a bit. I bet, Alice said, shooting Lauren a cheeky grin. Oh, ha-ha, Lauren said, rolling her eyes and slapping Alice's arm. I'm only teasing. I think it's wonderful. He's definitely one of the good ones. I think so. I like that we're already such good friends, though I can't believe I've never considered him as anything more. Well, we did all wonder if he was gay there for a while in the early days, remember? That's right. Isn't it amazing that just because a guy is kind and gentle and talks about his feelings, we immediately think he's gay? Talk about putting people into categories. It was an honest mistake. He does also have a fabulous dress sense, and his hair is always immaculately done. That is true, Lauren said with a laugh. Oh, Alice, I don't want to rush things or jinx it, but I think I'm falling in love, Lauren said with another long, drawn-out sigh. Ah, that's lovely. I'm so happy for you. You would make a good-looking couple. They walked on at a pace barely more than an amble. Lauren's relaxed state and dreamy smile were contagious, and Alice remained silent, soaking it in as she watched her friend, who was clearly lost in thoughts of her blossoming love. God, look at me, I'm losing chunks of time all over the place. You'd think I was a silly teenager, Lauren said suddenly, as if snapping back to the present. She picked up the pace a little. I don't mind at all, it's a beautiful thing. Yes, but I don't want to go losing my head and my perspective. We're taking things slow, she said in a firm tone. So, back to you. How are you feeling about the whole Carmel thing? Any more nightmares? Just the odd one, but it's not so bad now. I still cry all the time. But speaking of sharing their emotions, or not, I'm beginning to think David doesn't actually have any, isn't capable of anything deep. Oh dear, what happened? Oh God, Lauren, I think I've blown it. How? My whole life is completely in tatters and I don't know what to do to fix it. Well, other than get a new job, which is proving impossible. And see? Alice said, pointing to her face. I'm bloody well crying again. I'm a freaking mess. I think we'd better sit down on this bench before Bill collapses from exhaustion. Oh, shit, poor thing. Alice stopped and sat down. They'd done 2 quick laps of the park without realizing he was panting heavily. She looked at Bill, who had flopped down on his belly on the cool grass with his legs stretched out, and offered a silent apology for her neglect. Right, now, what's happened with David? I didn't mean to say it. The words just came tumbling out. What words, Alice? Take a deep breath and tell me, slowly. He picked me up from the airport, which was brilliant of him, especially when I wasn't expecting it. And we were in the car, and suddenly I'm like, are we ever going to get married? And it turns out he's serious about not believing in marriage. I really hoped he was dodging the conversation or that he'd change his mind. Anyway, and then I... Right, Lauren said when Alice had finished. So what do I do? Alice said, looking at Lauren. She was feeling a little breathless, but was relieved to have it out in the open. I don't know if I believe in marriage anymore either. Anyway, what was I thinking? I think we probably all crave belonging, someone choosing us to a certain extent. Maybe it's in our DNA or it's societal or something, but I reckon it's there. We just have to make sure it's with the right person and for the right reason. That's what Brett's working through, Lauren said. He says he's discovered his view of love is skewed because he was never shown what true love is as a child. I think I'm in the same boat. What do I do? What do you want to do? Make up, which it sounds like you sort of have anyway, or leave? Oh, I don't think I could leave. Look, that idea has literally given me goosebumps, Alice said, holding out her arm for Lauren to see. Because you're afraid of being alone? I guess. And where would I go? I've got Bill to think of too. Most landlords and body corporates don't like dogs. That's why we never had one before. I don't have any money, I don't have a job or any means to support myself. See, it's all such a mess. You do know everything works itself out, regardless of our angst and hair-pulling, don't you? I really don't feel like it right now. You're going through a lot of emotions. Maybe it's best you've said you won't make a decision until David's project ends. Maybe you'll change your mind and be happy with him again by then, when all this other stuff settles and you're feeling better within yourself. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been truly happy with him. I'm beginning to see that he was an escape route, a way out for me from my family, my circumstances, and Hope Springs. God, can you imagine my mother at hearing I've had another failed relationship? She's already having apoplexy about the job, judging by the voicemail messages she's leaving. That's no reason to stay, Alice, Lauren said gently. I know, but God, facing her and my smug, perfect sister makes staying feel like the lesser of the two evils. That's sad. I'm so sorry you don't have a kind, loving family. I can't imagine how hard that must be. So I guess asking them for some financial assistance wouldn't be an option? Definitely not. An absolute last resort. They sat in silence for a few moments before Alice spoke again. Thank you for being my friend, Lauren. Well, I'm not sure I'm very helpful. You're being the voice of reason and you care, and right now that's what I need. Everything will work out for the best, you'll see. Promise? I promise. In not too long, you'll be in a much better place and you'll look back on this time and laugh at how hopeless it all seemed. Meanwhile, I think you need to relax, ease up on yourself, not expect to have all the answers. That's the universe's job. Put it out there and ask for help. That's what I do. Make a list of the things you need to deal with to achieve your goal and whatever is bothering you, and then assess whether whatever it is in your control. If it is, then work out what you need to do. The steps, actions, etc. to achieve it. If it's not in your control, then put a line through it and assign it to the not my problem bin. Write notes if that's easier than trying to keep it all in your head. That might just add to your feeling overwhelmed. Anyway, you know all this. Remember how you knew what you needed to do with all the uni essays and assignments? You were good at that. But that was also straightforward. Approach life, all the stuff that's bothering you, the same way, methodically. Turn it all into bite-sized pieces. Everything can be broken down and managed bit by bit. But please don't settle for less than you deserve in life because it's too hard or overwhelming to change. I bet you felt exactly the same when you and your husband split up. And look where you've ended up and how much stronger you are now than you were then. I don't feel it. Oh, that's just because your confidence has taken a knock thanks to that bitch Carmel, and you're grieving the loss of your dear friend Ruth. Do you know they say divorce, moving house and losing a loved one are the hardest things you'll ever do in life? You've been through a lot recently. Cut yourself some slack. Breathe. God, what would I do without you? Alice said, leaning over and hugging her friend. I'm here for you, Alice. There's nothing wrong with asking for help or leaning on a friend. Just remember that. Come on, let's go back and have that lovely machine of yours make us a coffee. Yeah, and then I'd better get back to the job hunt. Still nothing? Nope. Not even an interview. And that's before the matter of no reference from last direct report comes up. Though no doubt my reluctance is coming across loud and clear. I so don't want to go back to an office, but that's really all I know. What about customer service? Doesn't your family run a shop? Yes, but there's no way I'm going to ask them for a reference. And anyway, that might be a little iffy on the ethics, wouldn't you say? Probably, but sometimes you have to do things you don't want to for the greater good. Sorry, that sounded condescending. What I meant is, don't discount actions that are a means to an end. I don't think you'd be a true friend with my best interests at heart if you didn't offer some tough love occasionally, Lauren, as much as I mightn't like to hear it. Okay, well, speaking of that... Uh-oh, Alice said. I think that's your phone ringing. Yeah, it might just be my dream job that I don't know I want and haven't applied for, Alice said, pulling her phone out of her pocket. She stared at the number. It was vaguely familiar, but it wasn't in her contacts. They can leave a message, she said, as she let the call go to voicemail. So what were you going to say? You were about to dish out some tough love. I've been thinking it might be a good idea for you to desensitize yourself with Carmel by going to one of her auctions or inspections. She wouldn't have to know you were there, and I think it would help your anxiety by facing up to your fear. Oh, just the thought of it makes my heart race, Alice said, putting a hand to her chest. Seriously, Alice, you can't keep letting her have this sort of control over you. I know you've been through something traumatic because of her, but you're letting her win, letting her determine the course of your life to some extent. I know. You're right. It's completely irrational. It's not completely irrational, Alice. That's not what I'm saying. I think you're having a perfectly reasonable reaction given the circumstances, what she put you through. I can't believe I'm like this after working for her for only 4 weeks or so. Alice, if someone was a mess after being locked up by a psychopath for just 1 day, held captive, you'd be sympathetic. I don't think time is a factor. You can't help it if you're super sensitive. Now you just have to try to limit the damage and lasting effects. I feel like such a fool for being so affected by it. You need to stop that, Alice. You feel what you feel, end of story. Everyone's reaction to anything is different, their own. I'm not judging you, I'm trying to help. I know, and I really appreciate it. It's just hard, Alice said. I know it's hard, but remember, nothing worthwhile is ever easy. That sucks, Alice said. Yes, it does. But you're right. I need to get a grip on it. My whole life feels pretty screwed up right now, so maybe this is one little part I can try to fix. That's the spirit. And, for the record, it might be playing a bigger part in your whole life than you realise. Yeah, that's probably true. You're so wise. Well, I'm not so sure about that. So will you go with me to one of Carmel's auctions or opens? Okay. When do you have in mind? Sooner the better. How about Saturday? Here, she said, after fossicking in her bag and drawing out a folded sheet of paper. She smoothed it out on her lap before handing it to Alice. You'd be doing me a favour too, actually, she said, by keeping me company. Dad wants me to go and bid for him, and I'm bloody terrified, so some moral support would be very welcome. Okay, it's a date. Great, thanks. No, thank you. As scared as I am, I would like to get over my Carmel phobia. You do know there's always counselling and hypnosis too, Lauren said. I know, but I kind of feel I'd like to try to deal with it myself. It's up to you. You have to do what's right for you. It's your journey, your life. So, should you check your message to see who called before we head off? I'm keen to know. Call it the nosy writer in me. Oh, yes, good idea. Maybe I've won lotto. Do you buy tickets? No? Well, that's unlikely then, isn't it? But I do like your optimism, Lauren said with a laugh. Alice was smiling as she dialed the number to access her voicemail, and then she felt her face fall and her blood drain as she listened. Her heart began heaving again and her chest started to tighten. She began to sweat and suddenly the phone slipped from her clammy hand. What? What's wrong? Lauren asked. Alice barely heard her friend's question as she tried to tell herself to breathe, but her breaths became ragged gulps, getting faster and faster. Then suddenly, as if a switch had been flicked, she was aware of where she was and what she was doing. Lauren had put a hand on her shoulder and shaken her gently, and then Bill leapt up onto her lap and began scratching at her clothes. She blinked several times and finally managed a few deep breaths. It's okay. Slow breaths in and out, Lauren said, rubbing Alice's shoulder in a gentle circular motion. Jesus, I feel like I'm having a heart attack or something. God, it hurts, Alice said, wincing against her tight and painfully pulsing chest. It's a panic attack. Concentrate on your breathing and pat Bill slowly. That might help too. Focus on right here and right now. Alice found Lauren's voice hypnotic and soothing, and slowly she returned to nearly normal. The only outward sign remaining were damp patches on her t-shirt under her armpits. Jesus, that was scary, she finally said, letting a breath out loudly. Tell me about it, Lauren said. Sorry. There's no need to apologise. Thank God you were here. So what happened? What was in the message? No one else has died, have they? No. Gold, Taylor and Murphy Real Estate need me to go in and sign something before they can process my final pay. Oh, right. The words, "Is that all?" hung unspoken. See what they do to me? You can't say what just happened isn't a completely irrational reaction, she said, lifting her hands up and dropping them in a gesture of helplessness. We're not having that discussion again, which is why you need to deal with it, why you are dealing with it. When do you have to go in? At close of business next Tuesday. I think that's what they said. I kind of tuned out after hearing who it was. Here, can you listen? She said, bringing up the message again and passing the phone to Lauren. Yep, you're right, and the form is with the receptionist, she said, handing the phone back to Alice. Get it over with. Don't hold off until after the weekend. A part of me would rather forfeit the money. I won't let you do that. And could you imagine the conniptions David would have? We've been through all this. You're going to face your fear, just a little sooner than we'd anticipated. Why don't we go in and have lunch at a cafe nearby, the one you did your original interview with Carmel in? Then I'll wait while you go up and do your signing. Couldn't you come up with me? Of course I could, but I don't think that'll help you to get over your hoodoo. You're probably right. It'll have to be tomorrow if you're not going to have it hanging over your head and worrying about it all weekend. Okay, it's a date. I don't have to ring them back, do I? It just said the form is there and to come in sometime, right? Yep, that's how I heard it. God, I badly need that coffee now. I feel like I've been run over by one of those road rollers. This is the end of CD 6. The book continues on CD 7.